Привет и добро пожаловать, друзья и враги, на первый выпуск Орг Report.
Whoa.
So we have the first episode of the Orc Report. I'm joined tonight by the host of the show, Katsep Konstantin, our special guest, Geo Vatnik, and me, Moskal GSP.
I didn't. At first, I did not approve of the rebranding, but I'm completely on board now. Look, after 265 episodes and after 1,000 subscribers, thank you all. You have to sell out at some point. So we've sold out to. Who did we sell out to? I can't remember. But that's our new intro. That's our new name. Thank you everyone for joining us.
The Orc Report.
Geo is back. It's gonna be a wonderful time.
It's so good to have you back, man.
For a very special occasion, might we add.
Yes.
I'm not going to say celebrate. I'm not going to say commemorate.
Owning the Banderites since 2020.
2018, mind you. But
2018, that's right. Holy crap.
Yeah, this has been slogging on for a good 5 years and some change now. Wonderful project, best decision of my life, so on and so forth. Best experience I've had besides piloting an aircraft. I'll just put it that way. Just get that out of the way earlier. But
don't mention that in the same sentence, and then you have some other agency show up at your door.
What are you doing with that airplane?
I'm pursuing.
We can't send them to Ukraine fast enough, but I mean, you have an airplane.
I'm pursuing my passions, and I don't care what the alphabet soup people, either connotation of that term. I don't care what either of them think, but I'm getting sidetracked because we're here. I'm not going to say in celebration because it's certainly not in celebration, but in acknowledgement. I'm acknowledging that it happened. Henry Kissinger has turned 100 as the date of recording, and likely, if I can play my cards right, the date of airing. And if not, happy Sunday. We record this Saturday afternoon. But I digress. Geo's back. We have plenty to cover. All the regular news stuff. And then we are going to do I'm probably going to have to, let's just say, temper my words a bit, but we have an article from the Jewish Daily Forward, my favorite publication.
Oh, God.
That gives a brief look at Henry Kissinger's life and some of his more interesting moments, let's just say. And it's going to be a good time all around. And I figure, of course...
I disavow right away.
I wish that were an option for you, but it's not. I would love to allow it, but I simply can't. But having returned for, I think this is either the 4th or 5th time, I lose track of things pretty easily, if you guys haven't noticed. Certainly, before we get in some of the trenches in the news, no pun intended, anything that you would like to update us on since your last appearance?
Just trying to write my book. That's
oh, wonderful.
Before the summer. So
I'll say it early. Give this man your money. So just get that out of the way.
Patreon.com. But no, this article is quite fascinating. It's just that it's very rare to like save a living person, or well, I guess the Kissinger. I mean, a living dead person. I mean, who knows what they're doing to keep him alive? But it's very rare to say like a person. Like not for the better, but in a way has like monumentally changed world history. So if that person didn't exist, history would be completely different. That's very rare to say of any like living or somewhat living person. I mean, my God, like 100 years old. It's just like, I mean, rightfully or wrongfully, I noticed that there's been a trend recently on Twitter that like as the irony left like rolls out with their takes about, oh my God, this like random third worldist Marxist regime in the 70s that nobody gave a shit about, and like they got owned by whatever like iteration of glow in the darks back in the day because of Kissinger. And it's like Kissinger's evil, and I saw the Anthony Bourdain quote being rolled out. I noticed that like the E-right has started to like meme based Kissinger, but I mean I don't know, like Kissinger is a very complicated figure. Yeah. And of course, like you could say, like for example, the one take I see is it was a mistake to, and like yeah, it was a mistake to, for example, his diplomacy towards China. But I feel like China, even without the auspices of the Nixon regime, probably would have been opened up, quote unquote, later rather than sooner. I think the Chinese would probably have been a geopolitical rival irregardless. But I do feel that, you know, Kissinger and the sort of like realist school diplomacy. I mean, Kissinger, I mean, he's not based, obviously, but I think that in hindsight, he's become sort of a mildly reactionary figure, at least in terms of like the current iteration of like global homogeneous, you know, global homogeneity, if you know what I mean,
Well,
diplomacy.
I'm glad you're making this point because I've been trying to say for years that I don't want to defend Kissinger, but compared to pretty much every Secretary of State, just to use a very narrow example after him,
Oh God.
I mean, he's a genius objectively, whether you like
Oh
it or
yeah,
not. But
an
point being
evil
is,
genius, but a
he
genius.
he looks like I don't really know how to describe it, but he is so much better compared to say the Anthony Blinken, the Mike Pompeo, the especially the Hillary Clinton, like people like that, where he is not a good guy, but he still is, I would say, grounded in reality versus a lot of these other people are just completely off the deep end.
Yeah, I think if Kissinger was about 30 to 40 years younger and had all of his marbles, we wouldn't be in like America. I think probably wouldn't be in the mess it's in now. But then again, I mean, you have to realize that I think intentionally or unintentionally, a lot of the bricolage of the post-war period in terms of American geopolitics and foreign policy was at the hands of Kissinger. Maybe not as directly as people think, but you know, I mean, that history. There's like literally, you know, probably hundreds of books in academia being written about him or have been written about him. And his legacy is a very long and complicated and complex one, similar to the legacy of a lot of great men of history. I don't mean great men as like a good person. I mean like in terms of impact. I think like a lot of people ascribe moralistic terms to it. But then
Yep.
again, I mean, Kissinger, like there was a lot of L's that he took. I mean, let's face it. There is like you could make the argument that the GAE of the post-war period led to the GAE of nowadays. But it's just the affect has been different. Now it's like very much the sort of like post-civil rights regime. We're going to spread quote unquote freedom throughout the world. Freedom of you know, the freedom to certain things I don't want to say for YouTube, but you know the one. But I think
Freedom
like
to be a rainbow flag wearing, well, they do wear them, but wearing and waving
coalition.
American Janissary. I'll just put it that way.
No, but yeah. So I mean, we'll go into the Kissinger thing, but GSP, you wanted to do the intro. Oh, you did the intro, but I mean like the
Yeah. Yeah. Break us into some real-time news. Give us the Minutia minute. We're all waiting. We're all dying for it because so far you would have been 8 minutes in the Minutia minute already, and we are denying this
apparently,
people, and it's atrocious.
Yeah, and apparently Russia's going to quote unquote decolonize, and they're going to like become like a very like a Hobbitshire Rainbow Coalition of little nationalisms very soon.
Well, yeah, that's what the Lithuanians told me. Of course, the Lithuanians wouldn't lie to me, would they?
Yeah, and who would be a better guarantor of little petty nationalism than the Americans, right? Because their country's totally not going through a demographic problem south of the border. If anybody knows nationalism, it's them. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I'll get into the minutia in a minute.
They have a flag. It's blue and white. They have a flag.
Which one?
There is this headline. Before you go into it, let me just really quickly. There is this headline I capped. I wanted to Telegram post about it. Telegram UK, of course, it's from the Telegram. Putin's Russia. This is by Con Coughlin. Putin's Russia practically defenseless. Whether the Belgorod attack was by Ukrainian forces or anti-Putin Russia. See, so they're like they have to scrap the narrative that it was by anti-Putin Russian forces. The fact Russia's border towns now find themselves vulnerable with a bitter pill for the Kremlin to swallow. So now it goes from they're totally internal Russians that have had enough with Putin because their own little Hobbitshire nationalism to it doesn't matter that they were Ukrainian mercenaries or special forces that penetrated and basically just popped caps off into these like border towns. It doesn't matter because now all of Russia's under threat.
Yeah, I mean that was the whole point of it.
Horde, all the external enemies of Russia, they're just gonna plow through them like the Westerners, the Easterners. It's like we're gonna, it's free land, it's free real estate nowadays in Russia. So
yeah. I mean, we'll get into that probably just after or during the Minutia Minute.
I gotta
because most of the action that's happening in the is not necessarily in the south. In Zaporozhye, there are more aggressive artillery duels happening in Zaporozhye, and that's the Ukrainians are stepping up pressure because it's going to be one of the likely places where they're going to try to pierce through. But really, since the fall of Bakhmut, it's been fairly quiet. There's fighting all the time, and probably the two places where fighting is taking place now is Avdiivka, where the Russians have made considerable
the Minutia Minute with
Okay,
we're gonna talk.
This is take 2. The Mossad almost got GSP, so we're back. Fortunately,
The CSIS almost got GSP. Apparently, they're like CSIS. They're like not as incompetent as the Australian one, but they're like almost as incompetent as the CIA. So that's a little bit of Canadian trivia right there.
it's good to know.
The thing is, like, they're not like the CIA. Like, they're not down with like the meme lingo. So like, if you're like a extremist, no, I shouldn't say any. I shouldn't even joke about that. But like, apparently, like they're behind the curve as opposed to like the American glow in the darks, where like the American glow in the darks, they're at like 2015 level. Like they know about dank memes and they know about like Pepe, but they don't know about like they don't know like about Cole or like Jemmy or anything. Like they know about like Groiper, but they don't know about like the current memes.
Yeah, come back in 2028. They might start calling things Cole, but
they'll start calling things Keyed in like 2028. Like so Scott Greer-Groiper. I miss Scott Greer-Groiper. He was a good poster. Anyway, so go ahead, Corin.
Okay. So with no further ado, I'll start the Minutia Minute in 3, 2, 1. And now to get into the Minutia Minute, we'll begin, as I customarily do, in the south. Basically, strikes on Ukrainians trying to cross over the Dnepr River into various islands that separate Kherson ever since the Russians retreated from there. Artillery duels along Zaporozhye, but there has been an uptick in Storm Shadow attacks in Bryansk, and apparently, if I have this right, and this was the location where 2 of the 3 were knocked down, but one of them did hit today. Most of the fighting, of course, the entire line It's over 1,000 kilometers. There is fighting going on all the time. The Ukrainians have started to step up some of the intensity in anticipation of their counteroffensive. It has been raining all week, and Bakhmut, of course, has been taken. So there is a slight pause. Nonetheless, in Avdiivka, the Russians have made more gains around there since last week and are closer to encircling Avdiivka. Of course, they've begun using fab bombs there for several weeks now. Fighting, of course, continues in the northern part of the Donetsk and Lugansk front line and the Donbass. There was a hit, I believe, yesterday on in Izium, where a concentration of forces and equipment belonging to the Ukrainians. The Russians claim about 20 pieces have been destroyed or damaged. The other bit of news is in Dnipro, or as the Russians call it, Dnipropetrovsk, there was a missile hit. And apparently this building, now if you see it, it's only like 2-3 stories high, and it's all brick. It's a modest looking building, and apparently it was a ward for like psychiatric patients and a veterinary hospital, according to Ukrainian sources. There was a woman, she posted a video, and she's sort of trying to apologize and get people off her back, because I don't know if she's a local or she has been brought in there for, to help. But she's in that area, and she let out a video that said that there were many wounded Ukrainians in this particular place. Now, I mean, it's possible, right? But if you see it, it's a pretty modest looking building. Dnipropetrovsk is a bigger town than that, and it would have better facilities than those. Is what I'm saying, than a vet hospital and a ward. The Ukrainians said 1 died, 13 injured. So I don't know. I mean, usually it's the Ukrainians that are doing this kind of stuff, and I'll be honest. If it was wounded Ukrainians, you know, I don't think the Russians should do that. I think it's not just that it's not a good look. It's the question of reprisals, and I don't want to get into the optics game, because the West portrays Russia as just focusing strictly on schools and hospitals, anyways.
Daycares, that's another big one.
Daycares, which is a total lie. There's so much evidence of Ukrainian troops going into these places to avoid detection, obviously, right? Anyhow, I'll leave it at that.
Once again,
have hospitals been bombed though? Have hospitals been targeted? I remember in 2014 there were a few hospitals that I think because of stray shells have been hit. But have the Russians systematically targeted hospitals? And
I don't know about the Russians ever targeting a hospital in 2014.
That's what I mean. They have civilian rest areas where people can go when their houses are destroyed. And I think the Russians, they know where they are. And I think they're media, even Western media is in these places in Ukraine. So
yeah, I mean, I think basically the Russians looked at this as the possibility that it's not really a hospital, but I don't know. Why would she say that it was? I'm just going basically what people have written on Telegram in the video that I saw. Again, Dnipropetrovsk has better facilities than the facility that got blown up. I don't know if they were recovering there, so it wasn't really a hospital. I hope it's not the case that they killed.
Once again, I agree with you, but given the track record of everything we've been told since before the beginning of this war, I'm going to need to see a lot more evidence before I say that this definitively did or did not happen.
Yeah, I know. We've seen this kind of thing before many times. Um, anyhow, like, so that's it for that area. And now to round out the Minutia Minute, I just have two more stories. One of them we'll get into. And that the first one is in the Kremenaya and Kupiansk direction. Now, the Russians made some headway last week, well, about 10 days ago. They managed to get a foothold on the other side of the Oskol River. They've been close to this area for quite some time. They've been gradually getting closer and closer. And now they've expanded that area by another 1 or 2 kilometers. Possibly the hit on Izium is maybe them preparing for against a Ukrainian counterattack in that region. I know the Russians, before they lost this area, desperately wanted to hold on to the east side of the Oskol River. And then lastly, of course, this has been in the news, another incursion by the so-called Russian extreme right freedom fighters. We haven't heard about these guys since March, and when we did, we saw an article get written up the same day that it happened by, I believe it was the Financial Times. Anyhow, so it's that group RDK, and the leader is this, I forget his name. He is a Ukrainian citizen of Russian descent who moved there, like some of the other guys. Now, 8 people who participated in this, who all of them who have been killed, at least 7 of them from the evidence, because one of the bodies is absolutely burned. It shows that he was, it shows that the 7 were actually regular Ukrainian troops that had joined in on this, right? And so it's a kind of a plausible deniability, right? There are Russian speakers and people of Russian descent fighting with Ukraine or have moved to Ukraine years ago. So it's not like, I don't know, for people who don't know this war, I've been following it since 2014. This is not like some earth-shattering news.
No, not at all.
This is like 9-year-old stuff. But anyhow, so they've been driven out. They've had some losses. They did manage to kill a border guard, which is better than last time, where they killed 2 pensioners and I believe 2 children, or wounded 2 children. Again, how are you supposed to ingratiate yourself? And if you guys want, we can get a little bit more into this.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this comes up all the time. Where
Mm.
I'm not going to be just to put all the qualifiers out there. I'm not going to pretend like the Putin government is the greatest thing that's ever happened to Russia, or even the best possible option out there for Russia. I'll refrain from comment on that in particular. But you do see this thing all the time that goes around that, well, did you know Russia jails its right-wing nationalists? Do you know Russia? Like
I wanted to talk about that a little bit, yeah.
all of this nonsense that gets thrown out, and then the best examples of all these quote-unquote right-wing nationalists, so-called, that they can show are guys who have fled to Ukraine, and every time you hear about them in the news, they are massacring Russian civilians in border towns. And not only since the start of the 2022 war, but also all the other stories you hear about them are attacks on not even Russian government facilities, not the Russian military, maybe the police sometimes, but it was like the last attack that they did, where they just shelled the car with the 2 retirees and the children, and I think it was the 10-year-old boy and the other one as well. But every example they can cite of these right-wing nationalists who are furious,
they're scum,
furious with the current government for not putting their people first because of Central Asian migration, whatever. While those points may have some merit, like I said, I'm not going to get into those right now. Their response is, I'm going to massacre my co-ethnics. Every time.
Well, even in 2014, there was a lot of them that went to Ukraine, right? So
yeah.
No, but like that's what I mean. Like I've been browsing like far right Telegram, and even on Twitter, I noticed that there's an uptick as the Russians are gaining meaningful victories on the battlefield. in terms of like the optics war from a right-wing perspective, I've noticed like a lot of more belly aching from the E-right in North America and elsewhere. They're like, oh, well, I can't support Putin now because he's using third worldist rhetoric. And like, but like, here's the thing, to be totally fair, they're like, okay, I think you have to separate like genuine, like the Russian nationalism that came out of the end of the Soviet Union when Russia faced a huge and still continues to face a demographic crisis when it comes to, from not just Asia, but also like the incursions of like, various Muslim populations. There is a demographic problem that Russia is still dealing with, right? And there have been reprisals against Russian nationalists. But then there's other things that they do that are like, well, let's, as you've alluded to, let's not get into a lot of these very, for lack of a, to put it mildly, unoptical people for the Putin government. But at the same time, I feel like, okay, yes, the rhetoric is cringe. It's like, the whole thing about the third world and racism. And, even Dugin has this thing, if you read the Fourth Political Theory, like he verges into like this weirdo post-colonial, like the Western racism, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I feel like,
well, he does both because he had an article a year or two ago.
The West
he said, why
they're also racist. So it's like
he said he asked, why are there so many Jews in such powerful positions in America? It doesn't make sense, right? And he got a lot of. I mean, I just think
then he'll backtrack on it with.
I don't think he's backtracking on it. I think you have to understand like where Russia is geopolitically, like who their friends are. Like obviously it's no more brother wars and but we'll kill the Russians. Like, I mean, what good is it, right? And the people who answer questions never asked, like Russia isn't going to save the West. It's like I remember in one of my Orthodox chats there were some really salty people that were rooting for Ukraine, and I decided to like really piss them off. I said, one Russian life is worth 10 Westoids.
Oh my God!
Why the hell should Russia ever spill its blood for the West? And it's like, it's like, well, what do you want? Like, like, I mean, I think I've spoken to Russians who don't like that because for them they feel like it's thankless. They're hated anyways. Yeah. It's pointless. It's a pointless argument. They have their own issues. Only the West can save itself. Okay.
No, but I do think that the difference being in Constantine, sorry to cut you off, but like I think the difference is that a lot of like North American right wingers, they still think of things in very like post-historical terms, even though they don't want to admit it. So Russia, like, okay, so for example, you're saying why should the Russians care about like Western peoples or people in Europe or whatever? There's like the Russians are still thinking in sort of historical terms of a nation state. Even like Dugin will say, and again, I'm not a Duginist, despite what people think, I'm not. I'm just saying like he would even say that, his theory, Fourth Political Theory, very much is like a creation of Eurasianism and so forth. So they're thinking in terms of like, okay, why should we care about the outside? But a lot of like even people on the political right, North America, still are thinking of terms of, well, we live in a global system and, America's at the head of that system and so on and so forth. And therefore it's like they slip into the mode of like, why shouldn't they care about us? Right. So I feel like the demands that they have of Russia is kind of ridiculous in terms of, well, Russia's going to be a base savior and they're going to like own the like Putin is not owning the libs in North America hard enough or in Western Europe. But it's like, well, okay, is it his
so
job
myopic?
Yeah, it's myopic, right? But at the same time, then they'll be like, well, I guess if Russia can't own the libs, I guess Azov is based because they have, they have their own like little symbolism and so forth. So it's like, and again, I'm not talking about specific people because again, I have better things to do with my life than cause drama. But I'm just saying that I do notice the pessimism among the right wing, the E-right in particular, has grown as Russia does as it does look like that either the war is heading towards a stalemate that is in some ways favorable to Russian geopolitical ends, or the sort of talk of Ukrainian counteroffensive doesn't go the way that people are thinking. I think, like, I mean, let's face it, the majority of people in the E-Right are probably just indifferent at this point. But the ones who like go out of their way to be like, Putin is cucked, or Putin talks of, they talk about like third worldism and post-colonialism. I mean, yeah, exactly. I don't agree with that rhetoric either. But I state this in the book I'm writing, that you shouldn't have to look to the outside for a savior. And that, maybe like Eurasian LARPing and being a Russia boo isn't exactly right. But at the same time, like, that cuts both ways. Like, demanding that, dissidents in Russia or the Putin government itself should like care about, like, you know what I mean? Like, they care about Western culture war politics to the extent that it undermines the regime that very much is waging a proxy war against it. So it's like, logically, of course, they're going to stir up divisions in the West.
Well,
right?
Look at the last 30 years.
As we do to the rest of the world, by the way, by stirring up culture war divisions throughout the world. So, yeah, sorry to cut you off, guys. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking, like, you look at the last 30 years, like, why should Russia invest anything in the West? Least of all, like, completely maligned groups. Like, I'm sure they have, like, their spies, and there is some influencing and maybe even funding.
No
Yeah, I have no doubt about that. But, like, honestly, it's nothing will come of it. They have their own issues. I mean, Europe is in the state that it's in because of its partnership with the U.S. over the last 32 years, in particular. Why is it so important, like, to defeat Russia? Like, it's not Russia that is helping to change the demographic of Europe and America.
Unless you ask the Italian government, then it's the Wagner group that's causing mass migration. Because that's and like I'm glad you brought all of this up, because a lot of it goes back to where these are the people who bought into something that I don't think anyone has truly believed since 2016, that Russia's going to save the West, whatever. And once again, even that was a bit of a I think people make more of that than what was really there. Like you said, a bit of a LARP, a bit of a just kind of something that people would just throw out there in a tongue-in-cheek kind of manner. Myself included, I have made those kind of comments before. But the point being is, it's that Russia's insufficiently living up to whatever arbitrary standard they set, and the fact that they don't means that Russia is somehow
in base world. So
it's
therefore they're bad. Yeah.
Because, and like I said, you can get into arguments about what the actual statistics are, because I have a lot of questions myself. But because of Russia's supposed abortion rate, that means that the West, that means that it's so going to somehow impact the West, because Russia doesn't live up to the values that the regimes we live under actively attack. So it's a way of funneling frustration into something that's much more productive, which I would say is really at the root of, especially in Europe, of the gladio nationalism concept, where you need to point your bayonets towards Russia despite the fact that your societies and your countries are completely crumbling around you because Russia employs Muslim soldiers, let alone that your own countries are being importing massive amounts of Muslims. They're joining your militaries, they're joining your institutions, whatever else, and not just Muslim, other migrant groups.
Who's the mayor of London?
But and well, you know what's really funny? The mayor of Tallinn, Estonia, is ethnically Kazakh. so you have this.
I do know that Sadiq Khan is part of the Chechenian. He's did his line. He was there at he was there in Mariupol.
But look, you can get into the questions, which I'm not going to get into because it's not relevant to the point I'm trying to make. Maybe Russia shouldn't use Muslim auxiliaries like every empire it has over the past 400
including
years.
Including
Western ones. I mean, look at the French if you really want to get into that question. But point being is, tragic as it may be that this might be happening in Ukraine, how does it impact my life and my values as somebody living in the West, that Russia deploys some Asian Siberian auxiliaries that are from a group that has a total of 50,000 people left in a front on the Ukrainian war? It's irrelevant. It's something that
Yeah.
you're supposed to be pissed off
But
about
because
you can't be
it's
pissed off about the fact that Germany and the UK are economically and demographically in a complete state of shambles.
yeah, but that's what I mean. It comes from treating this like a sporting event or treating it like a
Exactly.
culture war
Exactly.
issue. Yeah, like I mean, and the thing is, like the prediction, like for example, we all know that Western Ukraine has experienced huge demographic shifts because of people leaving. Now, say that there was a stalemate, and say that a new Western Ukrainian state does join NATO, right? Do you is there going to be a repopulation of people going back to those areas when
Oh, I'm
they've
glad
had
you
a
brought
life
this up. GSP,
like when
I think GSP knows where I'm going to go with this.
well, I
but
know. Okay, there was that fake CNN headline that is spiritually true, by the way, where someone like doctored this headline about Z-Man saying that they're going to like accept immigrants to, but really when you
Yeah.
think of like the long-term plan, I mean, the natural impulse of a lot of EU bureaucrats
Yeah.
when it comes to demographic problems be like, well, we have to just import more people. And I'm sorry, but like I know this is a controversial statement for normies, but I don't see how the economic problems of Western Europe are going to be fixed by more migrants. I mean, I don't like.
Well, it's
This is
going to do
like
the exact opposite, not only in
of
economic
course.
problems, but in every other aspect as well. And I'm glad you brought up
Yeah, exactly.
the repopulation of Western Ukraine, because this is something that I don't want to believe, but I'm not going to say I have a hard time not believing it, but I'll just say the evidence does ever so slightly increase every time I do the show, that
Oh,
they're making
boy.
Israel too in Western Ukraine.
Yeah.
Lviv will be Lemberg, it will be a Jewish city once again. That's the new plan. See, Israel's a failed project, so they need somewhere else. And I think it's funny that they're voluntarily moving back to the Pale of Settlement, but I think that's aside the point
Yeah.
right now. But
There
How
are
is
two
the
other
situation in Israel, by the way?
there are two other stories related to this that like
oh no, what
so
have I done?
God.
so Aristovich is in Israel, and he
You're
was
kidding.
speaking. I'm not kidding.
Oh no.
So he's speaking to a Russian-speaking Israeli that's on the side of Ukraine, and they're talking about like the region, the war, what comes after. And at one point, Aristovich says, he goes, "Well, Ukrainians are basically a cross between Jews and Poles."
Whoa.
I kid you not. Okay, so, but the other thing, because I mean, look, Aristovich will say all kinds of crazy stuff, like whatever. I mean, it's neither here nor there.
You said a lot of crazy things.
He has. But in Odessa, there's a square called Leo Tolstoy Square, and they want to rename the square because it is far too Russian sounding. And so the founders of the Jewish literature and the Yiddish language there want to name it the Mendel Moiker Sporium. He died in Odessa in 1917. And so this is a real thing. Like, I remember they wanted to rename like some place that was Catherine the Great, and they wanted to name it after like some porn star or something to own the Ruskies.
Well, you
Oh
see,
my
all these
God.
figures were actually great Ukrainians. We love to claim them as our own, but we're going to rename
But-
everything
but-
that's named after them.
Yeah, so I found this. It was from May 25th. Anyhow, like I personally don't buy this idea that they're going to set up Ukraine as a kind of a second Israel.
Oh, you don't? I don't either.
But wait, for those
it's
who think this is like an anti-Semitic conspiracy, is this like a legitimate plan that's been
I
discussed?
I first encountered this conspiracy in 2014.
Oh my God! But by Ukrainians or by just like random like Whig Nazis?
It was Westoids who published it.
But is like there any
However,
basis in fact?
those points were echoed. Okay, so back when there was a thing called Google Plus, like
Oh
I
my
actually,
God.
the good old days.
I actually, people, let's say people on the right who were particularly well known in 2016, 2017. Like I was in some of these chats, and
Oh God.
I'm not going to get into details, but I also spoke with some Ukrainian nationalists, and they voiced the same thing. So I'm I'm very familiar with these arguments. And I was also in other chats that were like Donbass and stuff. So I'm not. It's like back then.
God,
I think
even an Al Jazeera
I was more
article.
curious than anything because I honestly didn't know that much about it. But I can say that this theory it has been going around for at least 9 years.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've
The
brought it up on this
reestablishment of
show
Khazaria.
even before this war started. But I like for the record, I do not genuinely believe that they're trying to set up another Israel in Western Ukraine. But I do think it's funny all the things that point to that. But once again, even with all those things, I cannot honestly come to the conclusion beyond a joking manner that they actually are trying to set up.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just too funny not to believe in. I think that's kind of how I've been approaching it. Just for full context on this, because I've mentioned this the past 3-4 episodes at this point. I do not genuinely believe in this. Just to put it completely on the record.
But if you Google Ukraine second Israel, there's a bunch of articles from like the Washington Institute, Al Jazeera, Kiev Post. There's about the head of Ukraine and but I think like what's more likely, diverge away from the from this unoptical topic. I think that would probably be of course. No, but it's in the Kiev Post and Al Jazeera. I guess it is optical. So for example, this Washington Institute says Netanyahu's government approach and how he was sort of flip-flopping in the beginning, but now that the government in that one nation in the Middle East, now that they've experienced pressures and the American government isn't as aligned with them now, and they're they're in a very tough spot, as you two have covered on the show. But I think what's probably more likely will be that to rebuild Western Ukraine, if there is a stalemate, would take, at this point, a heroic level of I'm talking Marshall Plan level of organization, which will include Western quote unquote experts to go in there and restructure.
Yeah, there's not going to be a mass. First of all, the place is. Why would Jews want to move there?
No.
Now, there's historical reasons why they're there. There's historical reasons why some of the locations, particularly in South Central Ukraine, are important to them with the Hasidic movement and all that. That's where these things started, right?
And under communism, they experienced different pogroms and so forth. Yeah.
Right, and even under the Tsar, but
my point being is
they're not going to.
It won't be like them. It will be other populations.
Zelensky had buses and planes available for Jews. Were not expected to sign up to defend Ukraine. Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean Jews haven't gone there. At least 16 Israelis have been killed in Ukraine fighting for Kiev.
I think it was actually when they announced the annexation of the Donbass republics. I can't remember which publication it was, but they said that Putin was going to invade Ukraine and redact 500,000 of the special population.
Yeah.
You guys, I'm sure you guys remember
just
that.
Blatant propaganda. It's just ridiculous.
It's whatever. So
the far right, they're like, Putin is too pro those people, but then the mainstream media is like, no, he's actually like the Austrian painter. So it's like, what are you gonna do? Anyway, sorry.
If they leave Israel, they're going to go to Anglo countries and they're going to go to Western European countries. They're not going to go to a place that just had a major war where the tensions won't be resolved and another war could possibly happen in a generation. They're not. Remember when everybody thought they were going to go to China? Once maybe they used Netanyahu's words. Once we destroy America like a husk.
Maybe they'll atomize again, and the Sephardim will go back to Turkey, and then the Ashkenazim will go to the Anglo countries. I don't know. Maybe something's in the works here.
Why would they've got the best places in the West, particularly in the Anglosphere? Why on earth would they go somewhere else? What?
Okay, this is a crazy prediction, but I feel that the situation in Israel, I think eventually they'll have to normalize relationships. This is just purely listen, I'm not making a commentary or anything. I'm just pure geopolitical analysis. I think eventually they probably will normalize relations with America again, because I don't feel that if they don't, they're in a very, very precarious situation, as you've covered. But I feel like the whole like thing between Biden,
this is all temporary. Like,
yeah,
that's not.
I don't know the political situation in Israel that well. I know that Likud is like a lot of external pressures on it, but I do feel that, I hate to say it, Likud bros, but the liberals in Tel Aviv will eventually win, and they will eventually stabilize relationships with the U.S. I know it's blackpilling to some people, but
I mean,
yeah.
I've gotten into it before, but I'll get into it again. My schizo Israel take is, as the situation deteriorates, the base population of Ashkenazim will go to Anglo countries, go to more stable countries, and Israel will, and even you look at the birth rates, will gradually be left as a ground between the more ultra-Orthodox, and I don't know if it's really proper in this but Hasidic movement, and the Arab populations. That's my prediction for the... Maybe I want that to be true, rather than it actually being true, but I could conceivably see a situation where the base population that actually founded the modern state of Israel flees from it if things get too bad. I don't think they're going to go down with this ship. They have so many better options. At this point, I think, and we actually see this a lot in the diaspora, they put more stock in modern America as the American empire than they do the Zionist state.
Yeah, I just think like this whole we're going to reborn, Khazaria is going to be reborn. I just think,
but it never died.
It's just a Gladio op. I don't believe it at all.
No, it's
like the reason they're renaming Tolstoy Square in Odessa is because the vast majority of world Jewry is on the side of Ukraine. That's it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And
you just have to look at the Jewish politicians in America, Blinken, Newland, like. All these people are vehemently for Ukraine and have been their whole lives.
Well, even the media, like I know the articles are like Russia's uniquely anti-Semitic and so forth. Like that's another big thing that they're trying to pump. Like,
well, it is true. Yeah. I mean, it's not untrue.
Despite I don't know what certain people in the far right think of Russia.
Like, I mean, I don't know. I've been there. I've watched their TV. I've spoken with people. Like, I mean, I can tell you that's true. Yeah, much more so than here.
Oh, yeah.
Far more.
Well, and that's actually interesting because I do think while it does exist other places, philo-Semitism is a uniquely, I'll just say, Anglophone concept where you have to really be an English speaker to be a philo-Semite, which I've gone on this tangent before, and that you have to be from that more Anglosphere, Anglophone mindset to really be a philo-Semite, and most of the philo-Semites in Europe are already more aligned with that, but I'm getting sidetracked here because I feel like I
think Eastern Europe has a lot of like Ukraine, Russia, Serbia, everywhere in Eastern Europe has some degree of casual anti-Semitism. That's not a controversial.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
It's not unique to Russia. Like
no.
Yeah. Anyhow, but you know what? If we could just maybe do a little bit of hypothesizing,
of course,
about the reasons for the attack by the so-called Russian nationalists with so many Ukrainian troops. I'd love to hear your guys' take on it.
Well, the strategy takes by the certain Twitter accounts have been amazing. Like we've bred a whole generation of people who play Hoi 4, and they really have a great strategy how to defeat the Russian military. They just have to like pincer them and go behind them, and that's it. It'll happen. It was very funny seeing like the takes about they conquered, so they penetrated into Russia in such a lightning speed. It's like, but when it comes to military tactics, it takes a vast amount of resources and men to occupy and create a base in a conquered territory than just driving into Russian villages and popping caps off. I don't know.
You're missing the obvious the obvious solution here. You just need to use console commands, and the Russians will surrender. It's been that easy the entire time. I don't know why they haven't done it, but what are you gonna do?
I mean, I think it was obviously a media op because like a day or two after, like a day after they were driven out, and as I said earlier, like it turns
they
out
captured a few of them too.
They captured a few of them, including a guy from the Sumy region, Andrei Dudek. Like, and all the dead guys are actually Ukrainian. And as I said, RDK is part of Ukraine's, military forces, like the Georgians, like the International Brigade or whatever. They're no different than them. Like Ukraine has known long about them. But I think, because they made this big media hoopla, right? The guys that survived, right? Because like the team went in, one stayed behind near the border guard area where they killed a border guard. Then one of them went further to an industrial looking area. Another one went to a town, it appears. And
what were they going to accomplish with this?
Nothing. It's just media
like
attention.
Literally for YouTube purposes, literally like a sunset mission.
Yeah,
that's what it appeared to
me. It just shows you just like how susceptible Western audiences are to spin.
And it's not even terror tactics. I mean, of course they did go in and there were civilian casualties, but that didn't even seem to be their primary aim, which I'm certainly not going to justify, but that is a logical reason. If we go in, if we deal a massive amount of damage to the civilian population, maybe they'll think, there's blowback to this war, and maybe the Kremlin will reconsider blah, 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 blah. But, yeah, exactly. But it wasn't even that.
In the early 2000s, I mean, the Chechens, yeah.
I mean, like, the thing is I think they're trying to meme a Russian revolution that cannot be memed. I'm sorry, but, like, the life of the average Russian is not what it was 100 years ago. Putin is way too popular. Or 30 years ago. Putin is way too popular. And it's just not going to happen, which makes me think that they could potentially want to inspire something like this to happen next door in Belarus, because this area is not that far away from Belarus.
Oh, and with the recent, you're going to get into the news about how Poland more or less admitted that's trying to instigate another coup in Belarus.
Yes. So they've said that it's going to happen. There's going to be a revolution in Belarus, and we have to be ready to go in there. Right?
Yeah, and they actually cited that the quote-unquote freedom fighters in Belarus in 2020 who volunteered to fight against Russian aggression in Ukraine may come back and inspire their people to rise up. More or less just telling you what they plan to do. They plan on taking these failed Belarusian color revolutionaries from 2020 when Lukashenko managed to hold on to power, who they sent to Ukraine to get a taste of combat. I'm sure they didn't need much convincing. A lot of these people, once again, the opportunity to fight the Russians was a no-brainer to them. And now that they have these guys with experience and training and a degree of organization, I can pretend it's a great degree, especially with the backing of Poland, who I have suspected will get involved in this war sooner rather than later. And it may be in a much more unconventional way than I originally expected. Send them to Belarus. And also, you have to remember the story's been going around for about a year. Everyone talks about the 250,000 Russian troops sitting in Belarus. Once again, people thought the Russians are going to open another front. They're going to invade from the north, come down, maybe lay siege to Kiev again. But no, the entire reason those have been there, two reasons. In case Kaliningrad is cut off, that's why they're there, number one. Number two, for the potential Polish intervention. That is what it's always been about. That is why they've kept... And once again, 250,000, that's more than the entire Belarusian military combined. And
remember that Ukraine, everybody talks about the spring offensive and now possibly the spring-summer offensive, but at the end of November, including Podolyak, he was saying that he expects to have lunch in Yalta. Because by then all the Russians will be... He made that statement in
History
November.
repeats itself, I guess.
Right. I mean, he's nuts, but he is one of Zelensky's advisors, and he's interviewed many, many times. So the reason, Ukraine could have attacked, right? a lot of people were expecting Ukraine to make a winter offensive after they got Kherson, but they didn't. And one of the places that they went to start mining was exactly on the border between Belarus and Russia. I don't know if people remember that, but that started in November and it went all the way through December as well. And incidentally, History Legend had a very good video. I don't know if we'll get into it, but he had a very good video on Bakhmut and the numbers who participated, how large were the forces at the beginning, at the end, and so on. And just to briefly go back to Belarus, in the last week that the Ukrainian forces were holding on to Bakhmut, 5 Belarusian guys were killed in a building that was attacked. So yes, they are like guys that are like willing to fight to the death if it means like I don't know, they can join the EU or I don't know. But
well, it's a cool Moldbug on the Follow the Rules podcast against that one Ukrainian journalist from Current Affairs or wherever, I don't know where Lev got him from. So you're telling me that they don't want to be ruled by Russia, but they want to be ruled by Washington then. So it's like I can't That was a great clip, by the way. It immediately wiped out my hatred for Moldbug in an instant. But no, I'm kidding. I still have a lot of criticism of Moldbug, but no, it is. So are there Belarusian troops in Ukraine right now in the east?
Oh yeah.
So I think optically, first of all, optics probably don't matter when the Polish or when the Ukrainians do something. I mean, we know that civilians have been redacted and other forms of brutality that I can't say on YouTube. But I think that optically, it probably won't matter if Poland stages an outright Ukraine invasion of Belarus, because I mean the West will sell it as well because you're fighting in Ukraine. Ergo, Poland has carte blanche to go in there. Or they'll like say that, well, Belarus is actually controlled by the Kremlin. So there's no difference if they retaliate the way that...
I can't remember what article it was, but they said the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. So, of course, ever since the 2020 election, they've been painting him as somebody who has holding on to power with no real claim to it. Of course, Tinovskaya is the legitimate president, as we all know. So, very reasonably, and I didn't actually read the article, I will admit, once again, to give all the credit in the world to Emil Kazman. Subscribe to his channel. I will never stop shilling Emil Kazman. Wonderful. I cannot recommend him enough. I'm sure you've all heard me go on this before. But with that being said, going through the article, it's that there might be a popular armed uprising that Poland would have to intervene to support in the interest of the Belarusian people who are standing up against their government because they wouldn't stand a chance with the disparity in firepower with the Russian backing. So what they're trying to do is, of course, color revolution on the ground, because we all know that the Russians have actually become competent in putting out color revolutions, unlike, say, Georgia 08. Well, I guess Georgia 08 was a semi-success, I shouldn't be that harsh. Or the Maidan. They know that if they start that, they need to bring in the big guns to actually see something like that through, in which case, the Poles, who have been itching for a war since this is broken out, there they go. They have it right there.
But that's
I think it can indicate one more thing, and that is, if the Poles are saying that there's going to be a color revolution in Belarus, and the Poles have to enter Belarus to support them, it can imply 2 different things. One is that it will have to happen when Ukraine launches the counteroffensive, and the weather is better now. They've had a week of rain. So by the 31st or the 1st of June, the ground will be definitely dry, and they'll have a week of dry weather. So it's either in tandem with the Ukrainian offensive, and of course, I think part of the reason these incursions into Belgorod by these dummies is there to just, they want to stretch the Russian forces. It's not just getting optic victories for the BBC and CNN. It's not just to keep the morale up and people in the West to support them. but the other reason I think is, let's say that I don't know, in 5-6 months they freeze the conflict, right? Chances are the Belarusian guys that have been fighting and dying in Ukraine are going to try to sneak back in. Now, the KGB, and it's still called the KGB in Belarus.
Oh my God.
They're pretty good, but it's a big area, a lot of forests. They can easily whittle their way through if they wanted to. I would say that if things pause there, then they will activate something in Belarus. And really, all of this kind of indicates what Lukashenko has been saying. He's always treated like as this comical guy, and it's not totally unfounded, but he's been usually pretty right.
What's the public opinion in Belarus of the war in general?
I don't know.
That's what I mean. Like, it's more ambiguous.
I can say that Belarusians don't want to enter. They are not, like, it would be a powder keg if they entered the war. There's no way Belarus is going to enter the war.
That's what I mean. Like, but then if they were invaded by Poland, they would have to specifically fight against Poland. So
yeah, in that case, they might fight against Poland, right?
Of course.
But like Konstantin said, there are tens of thousands of Russian troops there for this reason alone.
Yeah,
and of
course,
250,000,
not just tens of thousands.
Right. And this announcement by this Polish minister comes on the same day that Russia officially brought over its nuclear missiles into Belarus, and that's several hundred kilometers closer to Western Europe, Central Europe, and acts like as another turret, if you will, along with Kaliningrad. So yeah.
No, but that's what I mean. I think, but there are Belarusians that have been fighting for the Ukrainians, though. There are like anti-Putin,
Well, yeah, like we said, these are the same people who were at the forefront of the color revolution back in 2020. Right. They needed more work, and this opportunity fell into their laps. And GSP brought up the thing about the nuclear standoff, and I want to read the statement that Medvedev said simply because of the first sentence of it. So, Medvedev on the possibility of a Russian preemptive nuclear strike. Europe has lost its mind.
Europe has gone insane.
I have that image. I do not have it with me, but I do have that image. The U.S. is generally acting in its pragmatic interest. They are not fighting themselves. They are making money. They're trying to wipe out a centuries-old enemy. As for Europe, for me, it's an amazing story. They constantly heat up and inflame the situation with their decisions. In this situation, they provide more aircraft to the Kiev regime. Moreover, maybe they will also give them nuclear weapons, but then it will mean a missile with a nuclear charge will come to them. There are irreversible laws of war. If it comes to a nuclear weapon, a preemptive strike will be necessary. The Anglo-Saxons not fully realize this and think it won't come to that. It will under certain conditions. So Medvedev seemingly taking, I'll say, admittedly much more eloquent. He's filled the shoes that Zhirinovsky left with his passing.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's inflammatory rhetoric. That's no surprise. Fundamentally, what he's saying, there is far more truth than not in it. But indeed, Europe has lost its mind. But that's actually what originally had brought it to my attention there. But I mean, like I said, fundamentally he is right, and I don't think any of them are going to go to the lengths to give the Ukrainians a nuclear weapon, because I do think they understand that is a bridge that can't be crossed. And also, the same Pentagon, and I know the Pentagon can be wishy-washy, and even intentionally so, depending on its goals, that was hesitant to give the Ukrainians long-range weapons and caution them not to attack Crimea, is not going to themselves give Europe nuclear weapons or allow any European nation to give them nuclear weapons. So that's just completely off the table. It's not going to happen. But I do think that in terms of nuclear standoff in general, Medvedev, despite some of the, let's just say, more exaggerated rhetoric, brings up some Fair points.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, but I think like it goes without saying that the language around this recent attack in Belgorod is that in Belgorod, the language around it has been very much like Western post-colonialism. We're going to decolonize Russia. We're going to like have a revolution of the people against their evil oppressor, fascist government like Lukashenko in Belarus. It's like very much the language of like a weaponization of a very like, how should I put it, a sort of like bastardized gruel version of like Western academic thought in post-colonial studies.
Yeah.
It's very much like a weaponization of like woke-tarded notions of like decolonization.
That's who it's supposed to appeal to.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's it. Yeah, exactly. No, but that's what I mean. When people like see, like, who is that one guy on Twitter who's like a EU politician? He had the map.
Is that the Austrian
like,
guy who keeps getting his phone number doxed on Telegram?
Yeah, like for some reason they doxed his phone number.
Yeah.
And he's like got this map. He's like, this is what the future of Russia's gonna look like. It's the Russian. It's like the Russian
Gunther
independent
something.
states.
I can't remember. GSP, do you remember what?
Yeah, he was in Belgrade. He's some Austrian diplomat, and he went to a monument that was
erected. He doesn't look like an evil guy. He just looks like, you know.
Well, he's an evil guy, and so he went to this. He went to a monument to the children killed by America during the bombing of Belgrade, and he said this should be taken down as a prerequisite before Serbia joins the EU. So he's constantly doing this. So people figured out his phone number and where he lived in Vienna, and he's been hounded on the street. There are Serbs.
Oh God!
who have threatened his life in Vienna.
I would not want to piss off like Serbs that live in Vienna. That's
they've assassinated people before. I'm just saying.
Oh my! Not that we condone any of that, but like
no, not at all.
How is like a major politician like apparatchik of the GAE? How does he manage to get his phone and address doxed? How did that work? How did that happen?
Nobody said. Look, when you're part of one of the minor.
Stupid?
I mean, he even posts videos of like my the apartment that he lives in. My mailbox has been damaged again by these.
With his mailbox. Don't tell you that as a diplomat not to do that shit. Like what? What a retard! Like, oh, sorry. For YouTube purposes, we shouldn't say that word, but
like I don't know if he's still
say the R word on YouTube.
I don't know. You could probably get away with it.
Yeah. But like that's insane to me. This guy's insane.
This guy has zero OPSEC, and it's the best thing ever. I 3 different times his phone number has been doxed. 3 times. It's probably gonna happen again.
Here's the thing. I hope nothing happens to him, just so the lulz can keep coming.
Exactly. That's
like I hope I think even Serbians are like.
I don't know. There's always other stuff we can laugh at.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but this guy.
That's incredible. Like wouldn't another like handler set him aside and be like, "Listen, bro. Like if you're a diplomat, you can't do what are you doing?"
Well, so I think he was in politics. Let me get this right. So I think he was an EU politician at one point, and he might have had he is still like within this elite realm.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
But like he took a selfie with the map where he's like pointing to it,
like
the soy jack meme.
I've seen it.
Exactly.
Like exactly like the soy jack, like the impossible chicken meme where they're pointing behind them. That's like he literally did that. Like, anyways, go ahead. Sorry, GSP, go ahead.
No, I don't know what capacity he's still involved in these circles.
Yeah,
and it's been like honestly, it's been weeks. It's been a month at least since the last time I read about this guy. I know who
Gunther
you're talking
Fehlinger,
about.
that's his name, and he used to be part of. Let's see, he was part of the Atlantic Council in Austria. That's his claim to fame, and then he did some diplomatic work. But yeah, But yeah, him standing next to the
Gunther
Northern Eurasia
Fellinger.
map 2023.
He just looks like a ridiculous guy. I can't take him seriously. Like, he posts these selfies. Like, I mean, he's probably incredibly evil, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know. He's
He's
like
a
kind
comical
of a
form of
guy.
evil. He's too incompetent. Look, now people always they
Look
like
at what
to,
he posted. I
it's-
agree with this. Her song was the Dunkirk moment. I can't hate this guy. He looks so goofy.
He's too
he's got, like,
comically incompetent to hate.
Yeah, like, no, but the way he posted this selfie in this meeting, he's like with his head, he's like got his phone up, and there's all these like musty old EU politicians in this meeting, and he tagged Jake Sullivan and Senator Blink and Secretary Blinken.
Oh, have you seen his
Like,
Twitter banner?
Besties?
Have you seen his Twitter banner?
Oh my god! Does he have a doggo? No, he doesn't.
No. Here, I will put it on screen. I'll actually send this to the Skype chat. Hold on. But it's him standing in front of a projector with his own face, with a quote by him talking about the enlargement of NATO. Here. Oh. Hold on.
My god! Oh no! He posted a photo of himself.
Hold on, hold on. I will post this because you guys need to see this.
I think he's unironically gay. I think he's gay.
Of course he is. Of course he is.
Oh my god.
He's also one of those Twitter accounts that follows like 14,000 people.
Like the fact that like he posted a quote that he said with a photo of himself in a presentation he gave. That's amazing. It's a Sam Hyde skit. I swear to God.
I will post this to the
more like Gunther Fellinger. I like this guy. I probably have. He could come on Content Minded. So Gunther, why do you think that the Europe should go into apocalyptic World War III, and it'll be like, well, you know, like it's a good idea. Like I don't know how he talks. I should look up an interview with him.
Okay, it is in the Skype chat if you want to see, and I will work on getting it on stream.
I love this photo. It's amazing. This is incredible. Like, this is literally a Sam Hyde skit. Like, this is... I love Gunther Failing. I have no hatred towards you. I think you're a great dude. I think you're crazy, but please keep producing the lulls. Please. I hope...
This guy... There's no words.
I love this guy,
There is no words. But, okay, it's on screen now. All of you can see this. Him... with a projector next to a picture of himself.
But the way he looks.
But he also uses his Twitter profile picture with this NATO expansion with all these little crossed flag pins.
In 2029, boys. 2029.
Will there even be a NATO in 2029?
Oh, we don't know.
I hope not, but... Optimism has led to great disappointment for me before, but...
Oh, man.
Speaking of diplomats with heavy legacies, you guys want to get into this forward article? I've been sitting on this the entire show.
Okay, go ahead.
I will censor myself to the best of my capability, but we have from the Jewish Daily Forward, and they update this article every year. So when I clicked on this link, it said Kissinger at 98, and now it says Kissinger at 100.
He refuses to die.
I quote, if it were not for the accent of my birth, I would be anti-Semitic. Henry Kissinger.
He actually said that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Actual quote.
God.
Former Secretary of State...
If I may interrupt, Gio, do you know he personally gave a copy of The Decline of the West to Nixon?
I think Spurgler accolade on Twitter.
And Nixon never removed it from his desk.
Oh my, this is like, see, Nixon unironically was Based World. I mean that, well, you know, he didn't do everything right, but so this.
No one can.
Yeah, no one can. So this is from, oh my God, even if I Googled this quote, even Lawrence Tribe talked about it. Let's see, a lot of like different politicians. It's in the Canadian Encyclopedia of Anti-Semitism. Wow, this is like a legit quote by Henry Kissinger. I can't believe that. That's, well, I mean, it's, yeah. Apparently Ronald Dahl was also an anti-Semite. That's why they have to redo all of his children's books. But anyways, go ahead, Constantine.
Yes,
Wow.
but so just to continue reading on this, if it were not for the accent of my birth, I would be anti-Semitic. Former Secretary of State is remarkable for his longevity. His policy record is another matter. That's a great start that we have to this, but it is one hell of an article. I tried to do screen share, but my computer unfortunately is not cooperating.
Oh,
So
I love how this article they're doing like the Chapo Ironist leftist thing where they're like, he was friends with Pinochet, and so that's why he's bad.
So, editor's note: an earlier version of the story was published May 27, 2021. How readers choose to commemorate the birthday of Henry Kissinger, who turns 100 on May 27th, may well depend on the previous reading about the former Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. From those who appreciate Neil Ferguson's hagiographical two-volume biography, will applaud Kissinger for his role in the first Jewish Secretary of State and success in helping achieve détente with Communist China and the Soviet Union. By contrast, political writers like Seymour Hersh, there's that name again, and who could forget Christopher Hitchens, have pointed to
neocon number one.
have pointed to a series of war crimes by Kissinger in Vietnam, Bangladesh, Chile, Cyprus, and East Timor. I only recognize one of those. I only recognize one of those as legitimate war crimes. I think the audience is smart enough and knows me well enough to know which one I mean, but I'll leave it up to the guessing. Marked by his decisions that were made with blithe unconcern for human suffering and loss of life. So,
well, they're kind of right about that.
Yeah.
Like that's why we're not like, this isn't like the base Kissinger love hour. Like he's an evil dude, but
I'm reading this article because there are so many great quotes in it that I'll probably have to censor most of, but it must be done. Law experts insist that there is scant chance that Kissinger will ever be tried as a war criminal, although some of his close political associates, including Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet, did undergo that experience. Kissinger's policies, after all, were concocted in the White House, and the historical legal immunity of that building for a myriad of crimes has come familiar to Americans over the past 4 years. That's a weird indictment of Biden. That's but I digress. Even authors,
all those children in Iraq and Afghanistan that he helped. Well, let's not
even
talk
authors
about that.
whose viewpoints are somewhat between the two extremes, like Walter Isaacson to Gil Troy, have presented troubling accounts of how Heinz Kissinger, born in Fürth, Germany, I hope I didn't butcher that, probably did, I don't speak German, ruthlessly achieved worldwide fame and fortune. The original family name was originally revamped by Kissinger's great-great-grandfather, Meyer, who aspired to be the glamour associated with the Bavarian town of Bad Kissen. But I'll try to stop there.
The spa town.
Yes, the spa town. Comparably, Kissinger's career may have been seen as an exercise of ambitious self-creation, which little can be identified as genuine. His near century is epitomized. Well, his century now is clearly great job updating the article, guys. Did wonderful work here. Is epitomized by a TV commercial broadcast in November 2001, filmed to lure tourists back to Manhattan after the September 11th attack. The ad showed a body double of Kissinger rounding the bases of Yankee Stadium and belly flopping on the home plate. A close-up is shown Kissinger brushing the dirt off his suit.
Why would they put that in there? What significance does that have?
I don't know. I guess they're just looking to kvetch, which being the Jewish Daily Forward is not a surprise. But I didn't say that.
Was it Yeltsin that did the Pizza Hut commercial?
That was Gorbachev that did the Pizza Hut commercial. And somebody on Twitter pointed out that if only the H-man lived long enough to do a commercial for
Oh,
what's that one Jewish rye bread company? Like the Manchewitz or whatever it is. But,
oh my god.
if only. But I guess we'll never.
I disavow. I
No,
disavow.
you know what? I actually am going to take the schizo take. That did happen. He was in Argentina all those years, of course. It happened.
I was just about to say.
It did happen. It actually did happen. But I've gotten so far off base here. Let's get back to reading this before I just go completely off the deep end. But everything about the commercial is phony, possibly even including the celebrated exotic accent. Biographers have noted that Kissinger's brother Walter, his junior by 1 year, emigrated to America with the rest of the family, and since then he speaks with an accentless American speech. Kissinger opted for an imposing otherness by retaining his foreign speech patterns.
You know what I call bullshit on that one? Because it's proven that, like, people that come, like, for example, from Italy, if you were a teenager that came over here, you have much more of an accent than a younger kid.
Well, look at my good co-host over here. What age did you go to Canada?
How old was I?
Yeah.
7.
Oh no, you still have a bit of an accent. I'd say so.
I do.
So it's it's not unheard of. And I imagine it affects everyone differently. So that's actually, and once again, this is just they're just looking to complain about something.
They're looking for it. That's what I mean. They're looking.
While
for
accepting
it,
honors from Jewish organizations, Kissinger also behaved and spoke in ways that estranged him from some of his fellow Jews. In 1985, he publicly supported Ronald Reagan's Leith-Rang ceremony at the military cemetery in Bitburg, West Germany, where members of the Waffen SS are buried. Kissinger opposed the idea of a national U.S. H-cost memorial museum because such an institution would be next to the National Mall in Washington, D.C., might create too high of a profile for American Jews and, quote, reignite anti-Semitism. Among the statements, one from March 1973 caused a stir when it was published back in 2010. Recorded in a conversation with Richard Nixon soon after meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, Kissinger disdained the notion of pressuring the USSR about the persecution of the Soviet Jewish population, saying, quote, "The emigration of Jews from the Soviet Union is not an objective of American foreign policies. If they begin putting Jews into, I'll let you fill in the blank there, in the Soviet Union, it is not an American concern, maybe a humanitarian concern."
Oh my God!
In 2011, Hitherow, secret U.S. State Department documents released from 1972 were likewise published, revealing that Kissinger was irked by the concerns expressed by American Jews concerning the fate of Soviet Jewry, calling the former, quote, "self-serving bastards," end quote.
I don't think Kissinger is like a self-hating, I think that he just has autism. He's just like, he follows the letter of American foreign policy down the line, so much so that he's willing to not have any special interest whatsoever. Like, it's I don't know here. I think Kissinger just has autism. Like, it doesn't.
I support that take and I
really
support that diagnosis. But to continue, Walter Isaacson explains that a contemporaneous meeting of Washington Special Action Group, a government crisis task force, Kissinger grumbled, quote, here's the famous one, "If not for the accent of my birth, I would be anti-Semitic." He added, "Any people who have been persecuted for 2,000 years must be doing something wrong," which, personally, I disavow the quote by the former Secretary of State on his 100th birthday.
Oh my God.
But I will read it for the sake of historical record, because I think it's important, right or wrong, to learn what these people say. Of course, I would never say such a thing. I would never. But during a Vietnam War era chat from October 73 with Brent Scowcroft, deputy assistant to the president for national security affairs.
Wait, before you go on, so Walter Isaacson's the president of the Aspen Institute, who wrote a biography on Kissinger.
Yes.
But I believe that, well, first of all, we have to realize the Aspen Institute's basically like the arm of like the DC think tank state.
More like the Aspie Institute.
The Aspie Institute. Yeah. So, but also like I remember in that particular biography, there were issues where Isaacson would embellish certain things. So I don't know.
I am shocked.
I don't think that Kissinger probably, I'm being so nuanced, bro, when it comes to Kissinger. I don't think that he may have like said it in that particular connotation, or if he said it at all.
Yeah,
because
well,
that's like a wild quote.
I mean, the good thing is about a lot of these were on Nixon's excessive amount of taped conversations, so you can actually listen to a lot of these if you dig them out. Which, great time, by the way.
But if it is on tape, that's like a
I don't know if that one in
quote for
particular is, but
Kissinger to
I know a lot of these have audio evidence to back them up, and they are a great time if you ever just want
to. Where like Nixon's dropping like the hard R.
Oh yes.
Yeah, like well, even FD, like even not FDR,
LBJ.
LBJ, like you know,
he's gonna keep him on the plantation for the next 200 years, so to speak.
Let me just look Kissinger. Go ahead,
but during a Vietnam War era chat from October '73 with Brent Scowcroft, Deputy Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, Kissinger found that American Jews and Israelis were, and I quote, as obnoxious as the Vietnamese, end quote. In another transcribed telephone conversation from November 1973, Kissinger declared, I am, and I quote, I am going to be the first Jew accused of anti-Semitism, end quote. This sally reflects its...
He's not the first, by the way.
No, he is not. They actually go into this. This sally reflects obliviousness as to the long-standing concept of Jewish self-hatred, as described by cultural historian Sander Gilman and analyzed at Theodore Herzl's Jewish State from 1896. Kissinger also mocked those Jews, especially those who defended Jews, especially Israelis. One such target was presidential advisor David Patrick Moynihan, whose pro-Israel stance evoked this comment from Kissinger, quote, "We're conducting foreign policy. This is not a synagogue," end quote. Kissinger further inquired into the derisively if Irish Catholic Moynihan wished to convert to Judaism. These and other wisecracks led to some observation, like Yeshiva University's Rabbi Norman Lamb, to disavow Kissinger as early as December of 1975. Wow.
Holy crap.
Noting that one of Kissinger's first actions as Secretary of State was to revoke the standard procedure for allowing Jewish State Department employees holidays like on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Rabbi Lamb cited other instances where Kissinger failed to commemorate or even mention the age cost. Quote, "Let us openly dissociate from Kissinger. He wants not to be a part of our people, its history, its destiny, its suffering, its joys. So be it. Let us never again, in our talk or our publication, make reference to this man's Jewishness. and let us insist that he be done with the occasional shrewd remarks to the press or diplomats. Or, of course, he would not jeopardize the lives of millions of Jews or others oppressed people because he is too taking refuge from oppression. A man who, quote-unquote, forgets millions of fellow sufferers has lost the moral right to make use of their suffering and his own refugee status in furthering his own ends. Our kavod, honor, as the article clarifies, ultimately will be better served if Henry Kissinger will succeed in serving whatever frail and residual bonds tie him to the house of Jacob and the children of Israel. Let us grant him his obvious wish to be disunited with us." End quote.
Oh my god.
This is gold. This is more than gold.
I think Kissinger just had autism. Like what I mean is like he just looked at the concerns of the conditions of America and its foreign policy relations at the time. And he's like, well, you know, we have other interests that are more beneficial to the American security state, not necessarily the American people, but I just think that Kissinger, like, I don't know here. I mean, he's not based. He's not like
no. But these quotes are gold and they're
piss
hilarious.
Off the right and the left, which is kind of like very funny. But I don't know. Like this is. Yeah, go ahead, Cons.
Like I said, this is in no way an endorsement of Kissinger, but I will.
I can't believe this is real.
I will enjoy the quotes for what they are. More accepting historian Gil Troy depicted Kissinger as a quote-unquote conflicted Jew and quote-unquote German intellectual, although his scholarly bona fides were questioned at Harvard, where Kissinger's verbose senior undergraduate thesis contained over 400 pages, leading the university to set word limits for all future student efforts. What was that about autism? What was that about autism you were saying?
Exactly. No, but that's what it, like.
This is gold. Where did you...
Yeah, this is... No, but it doesn't matter if you question his bona fides as in terms of his undergraduate work, because like I mean, like I said in the beginning of the program, it's very few people you could say that have like changed world history by the fact of their existence, and Henry Kissinger's one of them. So, you know, Wow, go ahead.
So
This is
we're
crazy.
almost to the end, so I'm just going to power through this here. Kissinger, Troy also likened Kissinger to literary precedents set by, including Sammy Glick, a Lower East Side striver from Bud Schulberg's novel What Makes Sammy Run, and Alexander Portnoy, the anti-hero of Philip Roth Portnoy's Complaint. Troy even called Kissinger Gatsby-esque, alluding to the protagonist of F. Scott Fitzgerald, Great Gatsby, blah.
They
I
didn't
would have
even
never
mention
known.
Duddy Kravitz by Mordecai Richler. That's much more. Like, because people accuse Mordecai Richler of being like self-hating, and he was actually banned in Montreal literary circles.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Yet ultimately, the closest bookish parallel may be with the 19th century Anglo-Irish statesman Lord Castlereagh, a subject of Kissinger's doctoral thesis. Hated for his many attacks on liberty and reform, Castlereagh inspired the following lines in P.B. Shelley's poem The Mask of Anarchy, evoking the carnage resulting from political rhetoric. I met a murderer on the way. His mask was like Castlereagh, very smooth yet grim. 7 bloodhounds followed him, for 1 by 1, 2 by 2, he tossed human hearts to chew, which from his white cloak he drew. As he approaches his century with no remorse or reckoning about any possible human rights offenses, Kissinger's legacy in Jewish manners retains the aura of Shelley's bloodhounds and human hearts.
Oh.
Oh, there's another article, but
I think that's why like anime racists are starting to like Kissinger now on Twitter. I don't know. Oh, this is brutal.
Oh, there's no words. There's no words. You can despise a man. I think, as you were saying earlier, he is in many ways the architect of a lot of the vile institutions that we have today. And
exactly.
He steeled them, but fundamentally, he's a very intelligent man. I do think that analyzing
unquestionably.
Yeah, analyzing his words, even the, let's just say, less inflammatory ones, love him or hate him, has a lot of value. You can learn a lot from his time, and he's a larger-than-life figure, and I would say I'm very fascinated by the man. That by no means I like him, but I find him a very fascinating figure that I could talk about for hours. And like I said, compared to his successors, especially his recent successors, doesn't take away what he did, but I would argue that, yeah, the Pompeos and the Hillary Clintons and the Blinkens and the whoever else, the Condoleezza, they're all worse than him, without a doubt. Now, had he been in their position, would he have done the same thing, if not worse? Possibly. I don't know. That's not the question. I don't deal too much in hypotheticals like that. But ultimately, he was the last real pragmatic figure in American foreign policy, which is worth hours of discussion at least.
Well, here's why he was better than them, that you've alluded to already, is that unlike his predecessors, he didn't, when there were certain strategic moments where he knew that American foreign policy was failing, for example, in Vietnam, and he took the word of people like McNamara that said, like, we literally have bombed North Vietnam to kingdom come, and it's like, we bombed them like literally back to the Stone Age. They're halfway there anyways. It's like, it's not working. So there were times in American foreign policy where he did have a capacity for pragmatic withdrawal. I think that even Colin Powell, like I've alluded to when I wrote my obituary for Colin Powell, there were inklings of him sharing that same. Of course, Colin Powell was a much less hardened figure, and so basically went along to not rock the boat. Whereas Kissinger, he would rock the boat when he knew that certain policies weren't working. But the current crop, like as you've alluded to, the Newlands, the Clintons, Condoleezza Rice, Samantha Powers, who suddenly people forget about, other people in the American security state, in the foreign policy, especially when it comes to the State Department, they have like a near religious devotion to the end of history American empire, especially now in Ukraine. So Kissinger, he said a lot of things about diplomacy towards Russia and Putin in particular. I mean, you have to realize Kissinger, was on like a first name basis with Putin for many decades. And so it's like he knows inside and out how the Russians think. He knows inside and out how people like Shoigu and people like even before Putin thinks, who are still there within the Russian, within the Kremlin system. So he will, even like nowadays, he's probably lost half his marbles. I mean, at 100 years old, who can blame him? Even now he's saying a lot of pragmatic, realpolitik musings
what's interesting
about the
is
current conflict.
they had to reel him in, and Kissinger.
They had to reel him in.
Yeah, we've talked about this, but Kissinger is the guy that would trot out to say the uncomfortable truths, because being once again the standard bearer of American foreign policy, he can say whatever the hell he wants. But even his comments on Ukraine last year was too far for the American empire, to the point where they had to yank his chain, pull his chain. You get the point.
Whatever metaphor you want to use.
Yeah, you mix metaphors. I love it. A big shunt of metaphors to celebrate Henry Kissinger's birthday.
I mean, my favorite. I think I say that the best thing that Scott Adams ever did was the Dilbert animated series that only lasted 2 seasons because it went down with a ship of UPN, right? They had the one episode with Kissinger in Albonia, where like Kissinger was explaining like why they have to like neoliberalize Albonia. It was pretty. The clip is still on YouTube. I think.
Oh, there's a lot of clips of it on YouTube, and it's
It's so sad they didn't make a 3rd season, because that was genuinely like a transcendental show I used to watch as a kid. So
and everything involving Scott Adams is so much better given his, let's just say, recent statements. Actually, I was in a work conference the other day, and I guess it was outdated, and maybe the people like I said, they were probably out of the loop, which who can blame them? There was a Scott Adams comic in it. It took every ounce of self-control I had not to laugh like a maniac. But
just get the fuck away. Just get the fuck away. I love how Scott Adams, like, it's sort of like Richard Hanania, where like he'll still try to be a libtard, but then he'll like try to be like, well, the data backs me up, so ergo in my boomer libtarded mind, that means I could say like truths that only like Steve Saylor, like I could start Steve Saylor posting if I have the data behind me. But then Scott Adams doesn't realize that, well, in contemporary political, like cultural political discourse, that doesn't matter. That
can I just say there are a few images online more comforting than the golf course of Steve Saylor. It's
GSP. Sorry, you go ahead, Constantine.
It's beautiful. It always brings a certain warm feeling to my heart whenever I see the golf course.
Oh God. What's your take on Kissinger? I mean, you've lived to see Kissinger's reign, GSP. So
yeah,
in the 70s.
I mean, I agree with you. I think he represents a kind of American exceptionalism.
Oh yeah.
That's what he really mostly identifies. I mean, I have an older friend whose mother is American, like white British Isles descendant American, and father is Jewish. And, they were sent to Christian camps. And this person is only 5 years older than I am. So you do have to understand what the 20th century was like, the mid 20th century in other areas, and even like the second half of the 20th century. So it was a very different world than, let's say, the last 20.
Oh yeah.
If I can put it that way. Yeah, I mean, he's not that unusual to me, only because I'm older, and I've heard this kind of thing before from people who are Jew. Yeah, so it was a different time. Now, I think if you look at Kissinger in his most recent statements about Ukraine, he says they should be accepted into NATO because they're the most powerful army in NATO. And, last year he had a very different thing to say about Ukraine, and that was, and I think it came after the Russians liberated Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, which came right after taking Popasnaya. And he said it was essentially going to be a disaster and they should accept the Russian terms. Now, shortly after, he, there were the Ukrainian counteroffensives, but I would argue he did not change his tune, and indeed he didn't speak up for months and months after the counteroffensives. But when he did, of course, he said what I just mentioned, and I think he was basically pressured into saying that because Kissinger has seen too many wars and the way they can ebb and flow, for him to just say, "Well, I saw those counteroffensives. I guess the writing's on the wall for Russia." I think he's smarter than that, and I think he has a lot more experience. So he's nuanced. He can be very frank at times. He is an American exceptionalist, but I think he's also a very pragmatic guy. I think there are things he says that could be categorized within the realist school.
I think,
and that's how I would sum him up.
I think, like, the take I would have would be that Kissinger's legacy, when in the post-war period in America, America had to deal with the fact that, well, actually it is an empire now. It is the heirs of the British. They're the heir apparent. And Kissinger, you needed guys like Kissinger to sort of navigate a very chaotic, geopolitical situation throughout the world, especially in the global South and the global East. And Kissinger was one of those integral elements, rightfully or wrongfully. Of course, there was a lot of wrong there, of navigating this newly formed American empire. And I think that his realpolitik really helped to guide the formations of it. And in a time where the world order was so fundamentally shaken up. I think people don't realize that because, like, nowadays, especially like leftist Zoomers have this like shithead like notion of like, why was Europe so important in the global world? Blah blah blah. It's like, fuck up. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's like, why even entertain that? Why was World War II so important? Why was Europe so important? It's like, well, Europe and the Americas being important. I hate to say it, but I mean, let's face it. I don't want to say it, but it's.
I'll say
I just pulled like a hairdo quote where he's like, I don't want to say it, like, but you're a spinster. I don't know. I don't want to go there, but you're kind of a hag. But no, it's like, I don't want to say it, but Europe and America were in the North America being important in the 20th century. Kind of for a reason. I don't want to go there, but like this whole like shithead irony leftist talking point about like, why was the Americas in Europe so important? What about global history? It's like just such a stupid like, I'm a global citizen talking point. That's like, I don't even know why we have to entertain it. But the point being is that Europe and the Americas were incredibly important in world history in the 20th century for obvious reasons. And it did fundamentally shake up the world politics in a genuine sense. And Kissinger, I think, was there as an integral part to navigate this newly formed American empire when it came to world diplomacy. And that's an obvious fact. Rightfully, wrongfully, we can talk about what he did wrong, what he did right from whatever perspective or whatever political ideology. But at the end of the day, yeah, so I don't want to go there, but Europe and America is kind of important.
I mean, everything we discuss and have discussed since 2018 can be either directly or indirectly linked to Kissinger. It's just fact.
Yeah.
Because that he was that monumental in reshaping America's role in the world, of course. Even with the Soviet Union, we all know the balance of power there. I mean, the American empire always had the upper hand. The Soviet Union, I'm not going to downplay what it was. I'm not going to downplay its influence. But maybe I speak too much with hindsight, and I don't know, maybe GSP being a bit older can correct me here. But I do think it was sort of a foregone conclusion that the Americans had the winning hand in the Cold War, especially from, I would say, the 70s onward. That it was more or less that...
Well, what was Kissinger's opinion about the Russian Federation after the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union? I mean, I know that he wrote a lot about it, but what was his general take that, you basically more or less needed to control Russia, or?
Well, I would say it didn't deviate too much from what the consensus was, which is we have to integrate the new democratic Russia, which of course means pillaging it, putting the Yeltsins of the world in power, stuff like that. But I'll just say, to his credit, dare I say, he was a bit more measured about that. And I would say actually, and this might be personal bias on my hand, the best take about former, not post-Soviet Russia actually came from Nixon himself, saying that if we don't navigate this properly, this is going to be a problem that is going to follow us for the centuries to come. Now, as Nixon's specific stance on the Russian Federation post-Soviet Union, whether he would have supported the complete pillaging, I actually don't know whether he did. It would not shock me if he did. But I would say, being the eternal pragmatist he was, he probably had the best takes, which I can imagine, just given the connection, Kissinger's takes probably weren't that far off, but I actually have not read much of Kissinger in that regard.
Yeah.
But I suppose the other big story I had was some statements that came out of Germany regarding, once again, the Nord Stream pipeline demolition, that they have now levied blame on Ukraine for the demolition of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Oh my god! Oh,
it's brutal. So like the empire of lies.
So
here's. We made another speech recently too.
So I once again am returning to the Nord Stream question. The answer is ultimately clear. The details are fuzzy. We know the important details, but I want to know the minutia. That's what the show's we have a minutia minute. That's what the show is about. Was it the Ukrainians? Did the Ukrainians destroy Nord Stream? Did the Banderists, with their red and black banner, put on top of their little yacht, and 5 men, 1 woman, sail out to the middle of the North Sea? They put on their scuba gear. They take a little dive down, and they plant the explosives on the pipeline. Did it happen?
1 woman.
Did it happen? Yeah, that was the story. They said it was like, it was 5 men and 1 woman, and apparently that was a very important detail that they didn't include in one of these. This was like months ago, one of these articles, that they just took their own private yacht out to destroy Nord Stream.
Oh, God.
But this is back in the news. Fundamentally, Germany is declaring, and I'll say this is the closest thing to the truth that they have admitted, because of course they're not directly going to name the American Empire, Washington D.C. as responsible for this, because they know they know what's good for them, so to speak. And I'm not saying that in some sort of a triumphalist. I don't think it's a good thing that we have however many troops we have in Germany at this point, or that we have colonized the country. I think it's actually been quite disastrous on both sides of the Atlantic, frankly. But I digress on that point. But this is the closest they've come to actually even stating something that could approximate an accurate assignment of blame, to put it in very descriptive terms. And what we have learned from this is the Ukrainians destroy our pipeline. They blame the Ukrainian state, not certain Ukrainian groups, not certain Ukrainian actors, the Ukrainian state. And they are still sending them aid. They are still sending them weapons. They have not budged on their position from this after the largest act of infrastructural terrorism in recent history. I can't think of one that really would rival it.
There's a word that the E-right used to use back in 2016 that I'm thinking of. Starts with a C, ends with an uck.
No idea what. I've never heard that word before. You're off the deep end. Please be more specific. Yeah, no idea what you could be alluding to there, but I would say that that certainly does fit the description of the modern German state, where they're going to assign this blame and then proceed to do nothing with it. And I question, because all these statements have motivations, all these statements come from somewhere else. What was the point in saying this in the first place? What are they trying to accomplish here? And
it's to shift the blame on the blameless.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really the best way you can put it.
That's almost like a religious terminology, right there. It's like yeah, exactly. It's like it's this, it's a reverse scapegoat in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead.
But I think you probably put it better than I could with that. But it really, I think we all realized, and look, I'll give credit to this program in particular for predicting this about 11 months before it actually happened. We did, by the way. You can go back to October 21, listen to our episodes. We did predict Nord Stream would happen. But they want to keep bringing this up. And I would say it almost is a rubbing salt into the wound that, yeah, we blew up your pipeline. We had our proxies blow up your pipeline. We can do it again. We can do it to the rest of Europe. We can blow up Turkstream. We can blow up any of these other pipelines. Of course, because these pipeline deals are still going on. And we will do it again, given the opportunity. Now, they'll probably have to wait for the dust settle before they try. I mean, what was it? 3 weeks after Nord Stream, they had the Hungarian security forces doing checks on one of their pipelines, and they found an attempted demolition. I can't remember whether that was Turkstream or not, but I know in Hungary they found evidence of an attempted sabotage of one of their pipelines. So
right, and they've been going after the Druzhba pipeline as well. Like, I mean, it's just again, it's plausible deniability. America will speak with Britain. Britain will speak with Ukraine. They will coordinate something, and then. I mean, part of it is also to create the illusion of independence, right? That's very crucial for American soft power, that all these countries and their leadership class,
they're independent actors in the rules-based order.
Yes, they all came to these decisions organically. They're all these countries are independent, totally independent. And of course, like I don't know, that still fools people.
Yeah, libs in particular are still fooled by that.
Yeah, so yeah, this notion that these countries like Germany or Britain are independent is kind of hilarious.
yes, and I think an illusion of independence is a large part of that, and it also is advantageous where they can, as I would say, launder these actions through these other states where, once again, to quote you, it is a plausible deniability where they can go in, they can send whoever to do whatever, and it gets done. The Americans, they can say, we didn't do it, we had nothing to do with this. The British did it, the Ukrainians did it. I believe it was, one of the copes was Ukrainian-affiliated actors blew up the Nord Stream pipeline was one of them that they had trotted out at a certain point. But it's something that I don't think is going to go away anytime in the near future, but will keep getting brought up. And I'm not going to make a definitive prediction, but we haven't seen the last of the pipeline and infrastructural sabotages. And I imagine if the direction of the war does keep going as it does for Russia, if we do see significant success over the summer months, which I think is a very real possibility. Now, we could see the Ukrainian counteroffensive that does see some minor setback. Well, I won't even say minor, but some setbacks that won't destroy the Russian war effort, but maybe put it in a more uncertain state. And even I'm not going to go on and say that is what's going to be the case, because I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think the Ukrainians had the capability to do what they did in August and September 2022. But just getting back to my original point, assuming the Russians are able to continue making the kind of gains that they have since the beginning of this year, just to put it generously, we will see more infrastructural sabotages to punish Europe in particular, because that's what the blame is going to be shifted on. The Europeans aren't doing enough to support this war effort. They're not doing enough to serve the interests of the American empire. Germany's still too reliant on Russia. Whoever else is still too reliant on Russia. I know one of the news stories that came out of Europe this week was the Czechs finally, well, quote-unquote finally, agreed to stop importing Russian oil and sign some bill to end their oil deals by the end of this year. You see these deals across Europe. Poland has refused to renew its contracts, but I mean, even this week you have Hungary and Greece cooperating. And this is right after the Greek elections where a center-right coalition did maintain its grasp on power. And they've been the typical center-right coalition that you would expect out of Europe. But so this is a little bit of an unexpected move that they cooperated to stonewall one of these sanction packages. So I mean, Hungary especially is going to be a target of this. I would imagine some less compliant nations in Western Europe, maybe France for its devil's advocate position, will need some form of slap on the wrist. But there are several small nations throughout Europe, and once again, I think Hungary is the prime example of these. But you've also seen this out of places like Slovakia, Serbia, which is neither part of the European Union nor NATO, which we can get into some of the Kosovo stuff in a little bit here. Bulgaria, Croatia, with Milanovic's recent statements, has been an interesting case. But these smaller nations are going. The blame is going to be shifted onto them as Ukraine starts to lose, because although they are under the thumb of the European Union, the American Empire as a whole, they're still. I don't want to call them renegade because that would imply that they're doing more than they actually are. They're still not 100% towing the line, and blame is going to be shifted on them. Punishment is going to be doled out onto them because they can no longer dole it out on Russia. So they are going to be the objects of anger and reprisal. In my personal opinion, I could be wrong about that, but I do think that this war, while it has shown the extreme amount of compliance and the complete American domination of Europe, it has also exposed where the elements of dissidence in Europe are. And after this, win or lose, that these will be dealt with every method that the American Empire and the European Union as proxy possibly can.
Slightly off topic, I will say this, because it comes back to what I said at the beginning of the show, and it is related to Greece. In the 90s, when there were very strong tensions between Greece and Turkey, Greece was finding out what it was, like to be part of NATO, and they were under extreme pressure by the Turks. This is the 90s when Russia was being pillaged. Russia sent them their air defense systems, and the payback that Russia got for this was that this year and last year, Greece gave them their air defense systems and their tanks and their BMPs and their helicopters to Ukraine. So so that's why I say it's like no, except maybe for Serbia, there's nobody worth Russia say like they're not going to do it. They can't do it anyways. But if people are going to play that stupid card, they're not worth it. None of them are worth it.
There's no sovereign country in Europe. They are completely under the thumb of the American Empire. Like I said, you'll get instances of dissonant, and I would actually, as much as I hate to say it, include Orban's Hungary in this. Now, I think Orban is somebody who is running his nation in a very pragmatic way that does benefit his people. But really, and I know he secured the Hungarian institutions, which has staved off several color revolution attempts, but there is a shelf life on the work that he has done being part of the European Union and NATO, where whether he just gets aged out of office or whatever else, there's not really going to be anyone to continue his legacy, and the work that he did to fortify Hungary will be slowly dismantled. And I hate the comparison, but I can think of no better one at this time. It'll be like Spain and Portugal in the 70s, where you had these regimes that did, I would say, when you add up all the positives and negatives, did quite a bit of positive work for their peoples. And as soon as the figureheads of those regimes died or were removed from office, that work was slowly dismantled. I mean, Spain was in NATO no less than 5 years after Franco's death, and elections were put in place, and it became a quote-unquote modern Western state. So even with that, even with these amount of dissents, I have to say, maybe this is just my eternal pessimism taking over. They're in a vice. There's no way out. You'll get these renegades. You'll get these honorable figures, these respectable figures like Orban. But at the end of the day, unless the American Empire is completely cast out of Europe, it's only going to be temporary relief from the inevitable.
Yeah. There's only the flip side of winning is that the U.S. has other priorities. Like,
no, but that's what I mean. Like, even like Russia during Iraq and Afghanistan, like they thought that like Putin was a player, but then he wasn't really paying attention to them, or rather they weren't paying attention to him, and he didn't he went off script, like Goldberg in WCW in 2000. He went off the script, and so yeah, you're right. I think, well, of course, like the previous point is very much like a elite theory, like Burnham de Juvenal point about how by the time you get to like the modern liberal state, now power has a tendency to mask itself behind this myth of like co-arising agreement based on the international system that, you know, players, that we still live in this like Westphalian state of like players being more or less independent from each other, and that when they do agree, they more or less naturally come to the conclusion through their own reason.
Yeah.
And geopolitical
Nothing's
pressures.
coerced. There's no coercion.
Yeah, that's conspiracy theory. Even Mersheimer is a conspiracy theorist. So another point I wanted to bring up. This is from about the offensive. Do you know what's his name? So, okay, keep in mind, this is like a pro-Russian source. This is a biased source. But this is Calibrated with Scott. You know that guy? Calibrated?
Yeah. I read it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so he interviewed Scott Ritter, and he interviews Brian Beletic of the
The New Atlas.
The New Atlas channel. Brian Beletic, my good friend. So I'm again, I have to like one Alexander McCoy impression each episode. So he says Russia is going to look like a punching bag for about 2 weeks when this thing kicks off, the so-called spring now summer offensive. You're seeing it as we speak. Missiles, drones, and sabotage attacks have and will continue. When the offensive kicks off, it will look like Bakhmut did in the beginning. Bakhmut. What did this take? 29 square kilometers in a couple of days. Everyone was celebrating / doom posting on the other side that it eventually got bogged down and destroyed and reversed. Meaning that, like, people, I remember this.
Yeah, the buffer zones, everybody was afraid that Ukraine was going to break through. They've already started losing the territory that they took from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
or
but then,
like a week or two ago. And
but even,
I know what he's saying.
People were doom posting, yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
I would just say it's like, well, you know, they're not completely wrong to doom post.
Right.
Russia could have prosecuted this war differently. You know, General Lapin, who was like on the ground, on foot, working with his troops to capture those so-called Russian nationalists fighting for Ukraine. He already suggested to Putin and Shoigu in June, like, I don't even think they'd taken Lysychansk at that, or they just took Lysychansk, or were about to. And he said, we need to call up a mobilization. We do not have enough troops, because in 2 months, thousands of their troops had served their 6 months and were about to go home.
Oh, I remember
this. Anyways, I don't know where I was going with that, but I think it's a good article, because I think, although it sounds positive, it is willing to concede that Ukraine will probably break through in some of the areas. We've talked on the show that, you know, they have 1,500 new, on top of their already large inventory of infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, as well as, you know, armored jeeps and Humvees and that kind of stuff. These are they're not jokes. Many of them have anti-tank missiles on them, right? Some of the Humvees have that. Some of them have air defense systems on board, right? They're serious. So, you know, people often talk about that they only got 300 some odd new tanks. But they're going to try to be fast, right? That's what they will try to do in order to break through.
But this is what Calibrated with Scott says. Speaking of being fast, 20 square kilometers a couple of days. Everyone was celebrating doom posting. Then it was bogged down and destroyed and reversed. This will be 4 times worse, and you will hear a lot of Russia captured X and X amount of time, while the AFU made these gains in a week. But remember, this is their last shot to turn the conflict around. All or nothing. They won't be counting losses, and they will push with everything they have. The Russians' goal will be to bog them down. This won't be a Kherson or Kharkov. This will be Kursk or Ardennes. Is your
Ardennes?
Ardennes.
Yeah.
Oh, he's referring to World War II, right? Or
1 and 2.
Oh, that's that's right. Yeah. That was before the Russian Revolution, when the military, pieced out. They're like, we can't do this anymore. But no, I think that, yeah, it probably will be more of a spectacle. I mean, whether or not the AFU has been exhausted to the point of them forcing a stalemate. I mean, for example, apparently, as we speak, the Chinese have said that there will be agreement for the 4 territories in the summer between Russia and the Kiev regime. So I don't know if that's true. I mean, you can never 100% trust the Chinese, either side of that they're playing to. So
I mean, that
it's
also
possible.
echoes statements from the Pentagon that if you, and this isn't even part of the leaks, which are highly dubious in and of themselves, but statements that the Pentagon has outright made themselves that if Ukraine does not see significant gains before autumn, we will press on them to negotiate with Russia for some sort of end of this war. Now, I have said, GSP has said, I don't think this is really a unique take, that they do want a ceasefire so they can rearm and revamp Ukraine in order to send them back into the front line. And
2 years from now,
they will keep this as a low-intensity, years-long conflict, similar to something like Syria or Iraq, if they need to. Just that constant thorn in Russia's side, something that can constantly be reignited, which I do think that's probably, from a Western perspective, the best thing they can ask for at this point. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the direction things are heading, where it's going to be they want to entice Russia with a peace deal that fundamentally will lead to this situation. But at this point, what motivation, the question comes up again, what motivation does Russia have to agree to a ceasefire under these conditions? They aren't suffering so far. Morale on the home front seems to be at least serviceable. Maybe it's not the highest in the world, but there's not massive discontent. Everyday life seems to continue as normal. Mobilization drives haven't affected the majority of the population so far. It's only been the partial mobilization, which called up former military servicemen with some experience. So there's that. Now, there are talks of another mobilization wave, but if we're going to talk about mobilization waves, we can look no further than Ukraine, which is, I believe, on the 10th wave now, versus Russia. It has done 2 waves of mobilization of a total of about, I know the first time was about 150,000, then I think it was 300,000 the second time, so it's not really comparable, and that's also adding that Russia has a much larger population as a whole, so when you do it proportionally, it's a fraction of what the Ukrainians have mobilized thus far. So,
well, I thought the Russians only did 1 for 300.
Oh, yeah, they did. Yes, they did the. I got it backwards. They did the 1 for 300s, and then they contemplated doing another 150,000. Yeah, I got that backwards. So,
including volunteer units.
Yes.
From Chechnya and elsewhere. Yeah. No, I know that Nemitz has said, my good friend Peter Nemitz, I don't exactly agree with him on a lot of things, but I do respect his opinion. He's of the opinion recently, he tweeted this about the beginning of the month, that he thinks that ultimately, in terms of the battle, Ukrainian victory will look like basically securing the 4 territories, but as a cost to that, Ukraine will be totally destroyed economically, culturally, demographically.
It already is. It would just be an acknowledgement of that.
Pretty much. Yeah, but
I think that's why the Russians are kind of waiting for this. They want they want the easiest possible terms to get the entirety of these territories that they have said are theirs, and they would rather see Ukraine. And you can see the rhetoric keeps going up and down, right? So initially, at the end of winter, beginning of spring, March and April, oh, this is going to be fantastic. It will be like D-Day. Podolyak and Danilov said things like the Russians won't know what hit them. It will be spectacular. And
do we have the Emil Kosmin clip of him talking about the highest officials of the Ukrainian government? Because I feel like that needs to be played.
So I know what you're doing. So there was all that kind of talk, and then as May started rolling around, and you could see that Bakhmut was going to fall, right? Then you started to see hesitancy, right? don't expect too much. You know, Reznikov in an interview in Germany said, it won't be one offensive; it'll be several offensives over. It could be years, right? So all the rhetoric literally went like 180, and now you're seeing them under greater U.S. pressure to launch the counteroffensive, and it will most likely happen before they get F-16s.
Yeah.
And I know that for the Ukrainians, the F-16 is the latest wonder weapon that will turn the war around.
It's the latest object of religious worship, like the HIMARS and the Stingers, and
it really is.
There will be icons painted with F-16s in the background.
Oh yeah, for sure. But you had General Milley yesterday say, like, the F-16s, we could never supply enough. Russia has over 800 fighter jets that they could deploy. And 30 F-16s are not going to change the course of the battle. I think he's also implying that
wait, are you
Russia
telling me
now
this is a real war, not an ace combat game? Because if so, I'm disappointed. I'm very disappointed.
Yeah. I think what he's saying is Russia is also capable of escalation. And he's worried about that. And that, 30 F-16s are going to make a difference. And that's why he stressed that air defense systems were good enough for them to launch the counteroffensive.
Well, that's what I mean. If you have a counteroffensive and Russia has air superiority, it's not very good for the AFU. That's disastrous, actually. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I can tell the Ukrainians don't want to do it. We have Syrsky and Zaluzhny. Kind of no one. I know there was this video of Zaluzhny waving, saying a few things after missing since 22 days, because he went missing May 4th. Now, there was all this speculation that he was injured somewhere in Kherson during an attack, and that maybe the same thing happened to Syrsky. No one knows for sure. For a guy that was missing for 22 days, you would have thought he would make his own video. Let's not forget that he missed out on the NATO meeting in the first week, or was it May 9th? He was supposed to be at a NATO meeting in Brussels. Like, you're the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian military, not just the ground forces like Syrsky, and you don't attend NATO because your reason on Telegram was, I had to attend a wedding, right? There's something not right here. And I think it has to be inextricably linked with what would then have been the inevitable fall of Bakhmut, and feelings that that maybe the counteroffensive won't be successful and it's only one shot. Danilov today said, we have no right to fail. We have this one chance. So the rhetoric has changed fundamentally from what it was in the early spring and late winter.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, Zaluzhny, like, he's been put by Z-Man and the West into an impossible situation.
Yeah.
Where he's, I mean, out of all the people that, if the counteroffensive fails, who's going to go on the chopping block, at least in the international press, it will be him, right? It won't be Z-Man, because Z-Man is like a saint nowadays. So I think that I really feel for him. I feel that, he's being put, like, let's face it. I mean, war is always a tragic thing, obviously. And as much as we feel that what the Americans and what the global empire is doing is wrong and evil, we have to look at, like, the human cost of it. Like, for example, I was going through Telegram, and I saw videos that apparently on the edges of Bakhmut there are these huge graves, these grave markers, and, like, there's a little girl on the grave of her father. And then I saw this other video where allegedly, I don't know if it's confirmed, where one of these far right nationalist units hung an Orthodox priest from a tree, and they put a sign on him. I think you probably saw that too, GSP.
Yeah, I don't, I don't know. I don't know if it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen Ukrainian nationalists actually hang people as far back as 2014 in Donbass. So
Yeah,
it wouldn't
I mean, we can't
surprise me. I
confirm
can't
it.
verify. I have seen the video, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, but the point being is that I feel like, Zaluzhny, out of all the people that would be blamed in the event of a failure of the Ukrainian forces to capture a significant amount of their territory, it would be him. I can't imagine, the guy running Kiev being at fault, at least in the international press. So I think that, he's under immense pressure to do this.
Remember, he wanted to move out of Bakhmut. He
Exactly.
he was saying even
that's
in December.
his men dying there. That's his men dying senselessly there. So
right.
Yeah.
He I don't know whether, I can't remember because it's like, honestly, it's been half a year, but whether he suggested going to Chasov Yar, because it's on an incline, it overlooks Bakhmut from the west.
Yeah, that was
so I can't remember that part, but I knew that there were at least 2 occasions where he wanted to move out. Then
they told him no.
Said no, we have a plan. We're going to attack Russia on the buffer zones, and then we're going to, and of course, that didn't work. They tried that for quite a while.
Yeah, I believe he wanted to also secure what do they call that? Sherwood Forest there. What's the situation going on with Sherwood Forest there?
Yes. I know. The Russians have made some gains there over the months, but they're small gains. They control about, I would say, 35% to 40% of Sherwood Forest. It's very, very difficult fighting in there. Because on the other side you also have the Severodonetsk River, and
that's one area where they have managed to bog down the Russians pretty hard.
It's definitely a stalemate. I don't know how much the Russians want to push towards, like, they're making an effort to go towards Kupiansk, but like they're not bringing in forces to take Izium or Liman. However, I did read a report this morning that there's an awful lot of T-90s in that region, and they're not being used. So maybe they're waiting for the Ukrainians to make the first move, and then they make the counter move. I don't know.
There you go. That reminds me.
But you know what? I sent. Sorry, Gio. I did send Constantine a small map of Bakhmut as it was a year ago. This is even before the Russians, maybe even April of 2022. And the thing is you can see by looking at this map why Bakhmut was so pivotal. I have a line with a slight arc that I drew to the left side of Bakhmut. Bakhmut is that place with all the arrows emanating. The next largest town above that is Soledar. So that agglomeration that you see, all of it to the west, right? After that, there's nothing. There's just farmland, right? But you can see just how much urbanization there is in this area. Like I've always said that it's fractured, but it's actually, like, in total, these are like large urban centers. Like it's not a town of 70,000 that's by itself, because you go 6-7 kilometers, there's another town of 20. It's another town of 15. Or if you go to Slavyansk, it's even bigger than that. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, I think it's like, there are at least 200,000. And then that doesn't count Konstantinovka and some of the other areas south of Konstantinovka, like Toretsk, which is just outside of Gorlovka.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, I don't know if the Russians will eventually make it that far. I mean, it's pretty slow going.
I mean, I mentioned History Legend had a great video last week, and he talked about like all the brigades that were there, right? 45th Brigade, the 92 Brigade, 93rd Brigade, 116th Brigade. 6 out of 8 specialty op brigades were there, including the Azov Offensive Brigade, the Frontier Offensive, the Presidential, the Hurricane, and the Spartan Offensive Brigades.
Oh,
right?
man.
Yeah. And that does not count the dozens of battalions and special units and mercenaries that fought there, right? In the video, he said at one time or another, 180,000 Ukrainian troops took turns fighting in Bakhmut and the immediate regions around them, right? The war, the battle for Bakhmut started with Russians amassing around 30,000 to 20,000 Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians quickly started flooding this area. And then by the end of the war, it was, according to him and his research, 60 versus 80,000 in favor of the Ukrainians. But what it did essentially is it gave the Russians enough time to build all the trench networks and the Dragon's Teeth and all that other stuff in the Zaporozhye region.
Oh, I see. So there was a ppurpose for like gearing everything towards Bakhmut. Yeah.
Yes, to draw them into Bakhmut. So you can tell, like the Ministry of the German military intelligence in February published a report that said that Ukrainians are dying at a higher number than Russians in Bakhmut.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal in January had an article that said the same thing, right? You only see the flipping of the script only after the Russians declare that Bakhmut has been taken does it turn into, like, they literally repeat the lines that the Russians said back in, I don't know, November or December of 2022, that they're going to turn Bakhmut into a meat grinder, right? Now, it was very bloody on both sides, as I've always maintained.
Oh yeah. The Russians,
like I say, it bought Russia time, and so now you have Ukraine. It has to make a move. I think that the Americans, what they want to do is they don't expect Ukraine to achieve very much, perhaps, and then they have something in store once that happens. Whether it'll be to freeze the conflict or move in is the big. Or Poland, that's the big question, right? The Ukrainians, I think, are, some of them, the way they speak, they're under the impression like, no, if we wait for the jets and more tanks, we can take it all. You don't have to do this.
We'll take Crimea too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So, but the Americans won't let them do that. So that's a very interesting dynamic that they've.
And then you know what's funny is that when this is all over, from years from now, it'll be like the equivalent of like boomer cons, like with Vietnam, where they'll be like, man, they were gonna do it, us and the South Vietnamese, but the dang liberals alive with fire hands. It'll be that, the dang liberals. It'll be like Joe Biden was a libtard who like tied the hands of the back of like America, just sending all of their hardware to Ukrainians. But
yeah.
I actually heard a pretty.
Afghanistan.
I actually heard a pretty.
You have like the Gen Alpha equivalent to the far right being like, "Fuck you, Dad. You don't know what you're talking about."
Richard Spencer will be inconsolable.
Oh!
He'll be phoning Hunter Biden to try to figure out what happened. I still love that. I still have that tweet where he says, Hunter Biden 2028. Yes.
Hunter Biden.
He is one handsome dude, and he never backs off in an interview.
Oh no.
He's just like, oh my god.
Insufferable. That's disgusting.
He retweeted a tweet from like a Ukrainian Antifa account going after Nina Byzantina, like basically wanting her head. And he like just tweeted it. It's like, they're mother your child, like, you know, subtle threats against the mother your child by some like, you know, deranged leftoid. It's like, wow, that's a really good look. But anyways,
she should have just watched James Bond. She should have just look, if we wouldn't be in this situation, that's that's horrible. But what says that?
Well, I know that
Ugh,
she's supplying some
ugh.
cannons to the Russians. Oh no, I'm not.
Oh
Why
God.
why does hairdo always come up? Why does he always come up? Why does he always
I
come
don't know
up?
because
But I do have to mention because we were talking about American military stockpiles. An interesting statistic came to my attention the other day that I figured is worth sharing. So, I think it's past 20 years. The U.S. has produced about 300 Patriot missiles a year, and in the
yeah,
most recent attacks on Kiev, the Ukrainians expended about 32 in air defense
yes,
with
yeah,
Patriot missiles. So
30 of them in 2 minutes.
yes,
But some people have theorized that the reason they did it is because they knew they were going to get hit, so they got rid of them because it would cause a smaller explosion.
Oh,
I don't know.
yeah,
That's one theory.
and it's not like they would have been at risk of being captured because they were all the way in the
it's like
heart of
Kooming
Kiev,
before being
so.
punched in the balls.
Oh my God.
It's
It's like if you knew you were being punched in the balls, like I better coom now.
oh,
Just make sure there's more.
God.
it's
I'm even shocked with the stuff I say sometimes.
oh, it's one of those episodes. This is why we bring you on here. This truly is.
Why is this an ancient like
It's
talking? Like, this is
it's.
like a
Oh.
Freudianism that like war is a metaphor for the libidinal energy, right? So.
Oy Gevalt, that's
No, but I was gonna ask about like where do you guys think the counteroffensive is gonna happen? But anyways, yeah, go ahead. This point about the missiles.
but there's been a massive expenditure, and I mean, I think a part of this, and I don't think this is a really insightful take, that a lot of the aid given to Ukraine is just stuff the Pentagon would have had to offload anyway, and this is just a really convenient funnel to get rid of all of it.
To get rid of their old arms that they were gonna put in a scrap pile, anyways.
Yeah, more or less.
It's brutal.
But
America's always done that with their like third world allies.
but it does make me wonder how much longer can aid be sustained to Ukraine, because we know that several of these European countries have just been completely stripped of their arsenals. It has been brutal. The U.S. not so much so far, and really the only thing that could keep this war on the footing that it was, say, back last year, is if we were to open the stockpiles and start demilitarizing ourselves the same way many of these European countries have been demilitarized, and I simply don't see that happening. Taiwan is too much of a concern. East Asia in general is too much of a concern. I personally think that the global hotspot in the very near future is going to be the Korean Peninsula. I've gone on about this at length. You can go back.
Really?
Yeah, past couple of episodes, because really, what other play do they have? The Taiwan situation that hasn't started yet.
That's not going nowhere.
No. Middle East, once again, that situation has been solved. Saudi Arabia and Iran are reconciling. Now, there were some border disputes between Afghanistan and Iran today I might get into depending on if time allows, but at the end of this, really, the American empire, in terms of being able to project strength and really push back against its rivals, the Korean Peninsula is the only place that can happen. And that's also combined with, it shows multiple things: that they are willing to confront a nuclear power, that being North Korea. The South Koreans would be the ones doing the bulk of the fighting. They're a pretty heavily armed nation. Now, there would be some American involvement, but unlike Taiwan, it wouldn't require a massive effort of the American military in order to prosecute a war like this, if this were to even boil over into war, which I think that they wouldn't be too opposed to. And honestly, it might give them the chance, and this is something we've been discussing for quite a few years now, that the American empire is, in my opinion, very likely to use low-yield nuclear weapons in order to project strength if it needs to, as its power and perception of power globally does continue to slip. And what more justifiable country to use a nuke on from the American public's perspective than North Korea? I think that, look, I'm not saying it would be a popular move, but I think out of all the countries that the U.S. could lob a nuke at tomorrow, North Korea is probably
it's less optically...
it's probably the least objectionable from the mind of the American public, because Russia and
They get
China,
it.
that's just game over. That's the
Yeah.
apocalypse. Most other countries don't have nukes. Iran, once again, they have the program, and there's been speculation for a lot of years, but they don't definitively have them. I think North Korea is really the only justifiable one that they could. So, for a number of reasons, I do think that Korea is probably going, maybe not the next war, but it's going to be the next spot of global tension. That's going to be the one that they're going to try to reignite because, like, I'm not saying there's any good moves in the American empire right now, but it's the best of a bad bunch when it comes to potential moves for regaining some sort of prestige or proving itself to the world.
I have two things.
Go on.
You know, the what the Chinese have to worry. I'll start with the East and then move to the West. But what the Chinese have to worry about is another generation of Taiwanese that like think of themselves as Taiwanese and not Chinese.
Yeah.
I know that they have an election coming up, and if the opposition gets in, then the road to unification with Taiwan will begin, and that puts pressure on the U.S. as well. I think the Americans would like to see China involved in a war with Taiwan, because that will accelerate the separate Taiwanese identity. It will create like a kind of like a low yield civil war,
And of
possibly
course, the
in Taiwan.
national mythology, all the things that come along with that, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So I think,
Another form of gladio, wholesome Chungus nationalism.
yeah, so I think there's a strong possibility for that to happen. The other
Only
thing,
polity
moving
in East Asia
west
with
to,
gay marriage. Taiwan, fun fact.
yeah, it's true. um, yeah, those Western values. So in Ukraine, though, the feeling I get is, you mentioned that they're giving away these old systems, like Hitler is Hitler, but we got some old junk that we got to get rid of. And I honestly think like they're thinking if we can get all the Europeans to get rid of their hardware, we'll replace it with our hardware. And their military, because of energy costs, maybe they might want to move over and manufacture the stuff in the US.
Oh, absolutely. And
Oh yeah.
as you were saying with the clearing out of the hardware, you have to remember when Poland sent half of its tank fleet to Ukraine at the beginning of the war, they were demanding a one-for-one compensation from just the Western powers in general, whether it be Germany, UK, US, for their Soviet model tanks, whereas the Germans were willing to give them a 1-for-3 deal because, of course, the Leopards were of much higher quality than the last generation Soviet tanks that they had just sent half of to Ukraine. And that's the deal they wanted. So there is a massive market for the remilitarization of Europe if the American military industrial complex can revive itself. And it was either an episode or two ago I was getting into this where that's a popular move, whether that be for a Trump 2024, whether that be for a DeSantis, DeSanctimonious, whatever you want to call him, 2024. We haven't decided on the pejorative.
Prosciutto run.
Oh no, but whatever you want to say, or even from the Democratic perspective, even from Biden perspective, where you can talk about the industries returning to America, the American arsenal of democracy is back, and we're providing weapons to the free world to fight off the aggression of totalitarian empires like Russia, China, blah blah blah. The rhetoric that they throw out there ad nauseum that you just can't get away from. So there's that right there. It's a very popular play for whoever wants to pick up on that. But the question is, does America? And I'm not saying one way or another, but does America still have the industrial capacity or even the potential industrial capacity to revive its military industrial complex to what it was, say, 50 years ago, even?
I mean, so far there isn't the evidence for it, but that could change. But at the moment, there isn't.
I would tend to agree that I'll believe when I see it, but I'm not saying it's an absurd possibility. I'm not saying it's something that's so unlikely that I'm going to dismiss it out of hand, but I'd need to see some real evidence of a revitalization of American military industry before I would even go down that road. But if it can happen, if it can be done, it's a very popular selling point to whoever can pick up on it, because you have more jobs, you have a theoretically stronger economy from the weapons sales, and you have a projection of American strength. So it's all right there. That could be something that they could try to use to revitalize the American public, which I think is a very likely, actually, out of all of, because let's be honest, at this point there are 3 potential presidents that will be inaugurated in 2025. That's either going to be another term. Okay, maybe 4 if you count Kamala if Biden croaks, but it's Biden, it's Kamala, it's Trump, or it's DeSantis. There's no other option out there.
Gavin Newsom, maybe.
Yeah. To be fair, we don't know exactly what the Democratic field looks like, but I think it's safe to say it's going to be one of those 4 who is inaugurated in January 2025. And frankly, out of all of them, I could see, given the direction DeSantis has gone, I could see them trying to shoehorn that into him, the great American revitalization of military industry and projection of power. That could be a very popular sell. It gets into that question of the faux populism, and hell, to use the term which has been used about a dozen times in the shows, it could be a gladio nationalism on the other side of the Atlantic, frankly. I think that in many ways DeSantis does reflect a lot of the gladio nationalist figures that we do see in Europe and other parts of the world. And
I don't know, that wouldn't be popular as it would be in the 60s or 70s or 80s. I feel like a lot of people would be like, well, this is obviously a ploy that really doesn't benefit the American people, but unless you could like sell it on jobs program.
I know, first of all, I know exactly what you're getting at, but I think it would be popular enough to work. I'm not saying it would be popular, but popular enough to work.
Yeah, but then again, it's like, okay, if this thesis that America could deploy a tactical nuke after like its 25 kill streak, and then he gets a tactical nuke in North Korea. Only millennials who play Call of Duty get that. I don't know. I think like, what would the optics of that be on the world stage in terms of like America? I mean,
well, I actually have gotten into this.
The rest of the world doesn't matter, but then it probably would though.
It's the only country to have ever used a nuke in the past, so once again that would be that. But go ahead.
I mean, this is the G7. I mean, really, the G7 could only have met in Hiroshima, not in Tokyo, not anywhere else in Japan.
Yeah, I know. Eh?
They had to meet in Hiroshima. Obviously, that was a sign, right? Obviously, it's a threat. Okay, that's not an accident.
I mean, I'm not even saying it's a likelihood. I'm saying it's a possibility. I think there would have to be a string of major embarrassments before we did see the deployment of
it would have to be a desperation
nuclear weapons. But I'm just saying it's something that is in the cards, and if American leadership does continue on the direction that it is, I could see it possibly in the 2030s, maybe not in the 2020s, but I could see a reignited Korean War in the 2020s, late 2020s, if I'm just putting it all out there.
Well, South Korea has a huge incel problem as well. Did you know that?
I knew that, yeah. And it's going to be the South Korean incel jihad. What a wonderful thing that we have waiting.
It's true, because they have these crazy they were imported this like crazy Thomas Ligotti conspiracy against the human race, like self-exterminationist version of feminism, where like Korean women just like flatly refuse to reproduce anymore. So you have literally the Western like gender war you see online is happening like an accelerative pace in South Korea, where you have South Korean femcel rad femmes who like refuse to like go with men and like reproduce, and you have like a whole contingent of like overworked Parasite, that movie Parasite, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Overworked like Korean subclass men, incels.
Well, I know that the most recent election was a right-wing guy who had a significant block of support from that from that, and
Well, yeah,
also one of his
the
first
incel
proposal
president.
was let's make the work week officially 70 hours. Let's just formalize what's already going on. So there was that. I mean, South Korea is on a self-destructive spiral for that and for a number of other reasons. The point where North Korea, which has been lambasted, and I would actually say to somewhat rightfully so, as a self-destructive state, looks like the more stable option on the Korean Peninsula. And I'm not saying that to be edgy or inflammatory. I'm saying that objectively, that perhaps it is undesirable as I personally would find it. I think that more or less anyone watching this program would find it. A 20th century totalitarian state might be more functional than a modern liberal state.
The modern, like, internationalist airport,
Like,
post-nationalist state. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
like how
these Korean femcells are wild. Like, you should see the stuff they say on the internet. It's amazing.
I may or may not have used several racially inflammatory terms towards them after finding myself in the same Twitter threads, but we're not going to discuss that on air.
No, but then it's funny because, like, all these K-pop stans, like, that are part of, like, stan Twitter and Black Twitter, they're like all these like North American femcells, or, like, you know, whatever, like, college age feminists. They're like, why can't we do that here? I hate men too. And it's like this weirdo, like, mech wave of wokeism that, like, have reverberated between, like,
they're all racially ambiguous. You can never see what they. You ever notice? Maybe I'm going a little bit too far on the show, but you ever notice that you can never really quite tell what they are, and it's like, you are the most ambiguous person I have ever seen. No wonder you have these outlooks on the world and on everyone else. It's like I would be insecure in my own identity too if I think you guys get the point. I think you guys get the point. I think,
like, there's even a bunch of, like, the white ones too. Like, there's they're like, oh, that's, like, they're leading the, like, you mean to tell me that we've imported our, like, corrosive shitlib ideology to the rest of the world, and that, like, when the colonies finally get it, they have to have, like, an extreme version of it, that then it comes back to the heartland, and they're like, we can do that too. And it's like,
that's free trade.
Yeah, it's like, that's fair trade right there. Exactly. That's the global village that Hillary Clinton talked about. The global village.
Yeah, the global. Thank you, Hillary Clinton. You're my hero. You're my idol.
The global college dorm, the global college sorority. That's what the world is now. So.
Pootler, send the nukes.
Talk about the Longhouse.
I'm done. I'm done. Pootler, send the nukes.
Harden your heart, Poot. Harden your heart.
That was crazy, dude.
that.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I could not believe that.
But who said that? Harden your heart, Putin.
It was those Palestinians at a wedding. Remember that, the singer? Harden your heart, Putin. Go for the kill, boy.
That's crazy, man. Like, it's you know what's funny is because all the people that are, like, pro-Palestinian in the West, like all those, like, libs, they also hate Russia. So it's,
they really don't know the Palestinians.
Yeah. No, but it's funny because then you'll have, like, your, like, 5th gen diaspora, like, college educated hijabi who's, like, you know, Palestine, all this, but then it's like they also hate Russia. So it's, I don't know. It's like, it's like the war is like an ideological mess in terms of, like, the world ideological picture. It's just like it's everywhere at once.
Oh, this is the consequence of the American Empire. This is the world in which this is Henry Kissinger's world. I think, just to bring this all back full circle, this is Henry Kissinger's world, and you're living in it. I'm not saying you have to like it, but I don't like it.
It's
personally.
the end of the world as we know it. I feel fine.
You know what? Your optimism no, it's not. But your optimism disgusts me in that regard. I wish it was. It's like, you know,
it's not fine. No, REM was wrong. It's not fine.
They're right. It's not fine. And it's also not the end of the world, because it's like there's a lot of mileage left on this baby, and I'm not looking forward to it.
Well, to quote the band Nevermore, waiting for the world to end, but it never ends. R.I.P. World Aid. Oh boy, but the Korean femcells are crazy. They some of the things they say, it's like performance art, I feel, but then it's shocking. Like, it's just like I feel like there is this ultimate like again, it's really funny when you export ideology to the colonies and then they come back in weird, strange forms. And like people don't think of things in terms of populations or the sort of like stock of a population. But like even with China, like when you have like a lot of like very bitter young incels and femcels, like nothing good can come of that, really. And it's like,
well, the best thing
China's been dealing with their population bottleneck for a long time.
If I have any Chinese listeners to this, young Chinese men who are single because of the massive demographic issues that are facing the current generation in China, I would say go enterprise on one of the many investment projects that your country has abroad. Okay, just leave, just go. There's a lot of opportunity out there. Go oversee some mining operation in
Geomax is the manosphere people say.
Oh no! Go oversee some infrastructure project in Indonesia. It's gonna be fun. You're gonna have people at your command, and you know what? You can have your own empire of dust. You can be the protagonist of the next empire of dust. Which sounds like, look, if I was given said opportunity, I would do it. Sounds like a fun time. Sounds like a great time to manage some construction or mining project in I don't know, wherever.
You know what's funny is that on Twitter recently, just to like troll the right wingers, Radfem Austrian Painter, our favorite girl, she said that like what's wrong with like if like Eastern Europe has a lot of women and like China has a lot of men, like why can't they create like a Hapa empire? And then of course like all of like the E-Right was like descending on this take because like I shouldn't even mention her, but like I don't want to like, but I thought it was funny though. She's like, why can't we create a Hapa empire out of like embittered Chinese incels and like hot Eastern European women?
If there were ever a Hapa empire, I might become an Atlanticist. I'm just warning you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say definitively, but there's a possibility that I might become an Atlanticist in that scenario.
That's what Dugan wants, a second Chinese one. No, I'm kidding. But
Oh no.
All those Nouveau Droid Duganists back in 2016, that's what they wanted, just a hot Asian wife. No, I'm kidding. I don't want to slander anybody. I'm just saying it's a funny joke. I don't mean that seriously. I'm just saying like it is kind of funny like how she brought that up. We're like, well, if that's the way to solve the demographic crisis is like having a Hapa empire in the East.
I mean, they're already in Africa doing that.
Yeah, but the Chinese didn't want to go with the Africa. Like,
I'm just saying that's where they are.
Yeah.
And it's happened there. So,
yeah, it's true.
In any case, I don't see any kind of moves that would indicate that's even a thing.
Well, we all know that China's going to conquer Siberia despite the fact all territorial disputes have been resolved as of 2004. They're just going to do it. The future of Siberia is Chinese, as we've been told for the past 20 years. I've seen no indication as such, but who am I to dispute this? Of course, the neoconservative think tank said that China and Russia will turn on each other and that Siberia will be Chinese. Who am I to disagree with the neoconservative experts? I'm nobody.
I've literally listened to that crap for over 20 years. That's going to happen any moment. And we've pointed out on this show, even before the war in Ukraine started, how Canada has 5 times the Chinese population that Russia has.
We do?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like, they're not going to, again, it's like emotionally, I want this. Now I have to create an argument where that sounds reasonable and logical, but it's not the case.
I mean, truth be told,
it's just not knowing the material. The fact of the matter is they don't want to move there. They're not going to move there. They're going to move.
Chinese don't want to move to Siberia? Come on. Oh, no, why?
Yeah,
it's so fucking stupid.
I'm not
getting the people that see. This is why Henry Kissinger has to live forever, because the people running our world are so mind-numbingly retarded compared to him that it's.
Are you telling me that Henry Kissinger has been confined to an eternity of tard wrangling?
No, but he's too old to Tard Wrangle now. That's the
Well,
problem.
who
Like,
else is gonna do it? You got any other ideas?
I feel like that's why Kissinger's gonna live forever, because he can't like see the world he created disintegrate in front of his eyes by like the sheer stupidity of all the people that came after him. Like it's really quite tragic. This is why
So
Henry
it's gonna be
Kissinger is a
so
tragic figure.
Kissinger's gonna do like a Mr. House kind of thing. Was what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah, well, yeah,
He's
exactly.
just gonna be living on life support for the next 300 years. Just
I forgot. Is that how House ended? Because like my parents watched that show. I watched a bit
no,
of
no.
it.
I was talking about New Vegas.
Oh, New Vegas. Oh, yeah. See, I'm not a gamer, so
Oh,
my.
sad. Get off this program right now.
Oh boy.
No, but
What
yeah.
was the woke one? The recent one? 79 or what was it called?
76, which I look. I'm not
The
gonna pretend
woke
like
one. I hate that word so much now.
I'm actually I kid, but I'm actually not that much of a gamer. It's one of those kind of things that just kind of falls off when you start doing other things with your life. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know everyone was complaining about that. I have some friends who are still
They had a
pretty
dragon though.
yeah, but
They had a nuclear created dragon.
that's there's just don't just no. We're not doing that. But
I can't
but
believe you thought Howard. What the hell?
Kissinger will live for the next 300 years on life support just to be.
Will Kissinger outlive Todd Howard?
Who won't Kissinger outlive? Let's start with that.
Mm.
Okay, because that's actually a shorter list. So that's
Yeah.
but.
Yeah. Real Methuselah right there.
He'll be around for the next 300 years on life support. They will do every scientific method, every bit of Talmudic magic that they can to keep this man breathing.
Every bit of adrenochrome.
Now you're getting it. Now you're getting it. But
oh man.
yeah, he's gonna be around perpetually, and there's really nothing we can do about it. And we live in Kissinger's world is ultimately what I was getting at with this whole rambling mess.
Yeah. But anyways, Kissinger. I mean, yeah, I feel like he is a tragic figure in that sense, because the word he like rightfully or wrongfully. I mean, I don't know though, but then again, I mean, I don't want to place as much stock in like this sort of like thesis that the political order is going to deteriorate in the next decade or whatever. I think that systematically, I mean, nothing lasts forever. We are in the Spenglerian winter, but I wouldn't be shocked if the prevailing order, at least a much more degraded version of it, lasts maybe not 100 years, but maybe well into our, by the time we have grandchildren.
Well, I'm just saying everything's going to
God allows
deteriorate
it.
because that's just the path we're on. Will it completely
Yeah.
implode or collapse? That's another question. In which case,
That's
I'm not
scenario.
gonna comment on that. But no, things are just going to degrade and deteriorate. Maybe I'm getting too far beyond the scope of this program, but I mean, you really think that we're going to be able to maintain the level of industrial civilization we have for the next century? Given,
oh God, no.
No, absolutely not. And it's going to be a thing. Energy is going to be harder. Here's look. I'll just put it this way. Here's the real irony of it. The kind of people produced by industrial society are not the kind of people who can maintain industrial society. And fundamentally, I think that's the problem we're going to run into over the next 2-3 centuries, where I'm not saying we're going to go back to a completely pre-industrial state, but it's going to be a very debauched and degraded as compared to where we peaked. And I would say, I don't know, probably these past 20 years, at least in terms of industrial society and technological progress, have been the peak. I don't know, maybe we have a few more years or decades we can squeeze out of this, but we're going to hit a plateau followed by a decline. Now, how sharp that decline will be, I can't really say, but fundamentally, we're almost at the carrying limit in terms of technological advancement, in my personal opinion. I don't have much hard evidence to back this up, but this is just gut feeling. Perhaps I will take the time one day to give you a more fleshed out argument on this, but I'm just saying, from my just personal view, that's how I see things going. Don't ask me to defend this rigorously, because I can't really, but this is just where my gut's telling me, and perhaps I'll be proven wrong. I somewhat hope to be proven wrong, at least on some things, but otherwise, I'm not optimistic for the just say the future of industrial civilization, technological quote unquote progress.
Well, on the cultural side, my brother and I were talking, about this subject, and I brought up, some writings, records uh, um, attributed to the Vandals and other Germanic tribes when they conquered the Roman Western Empire, and what life there was like, and even under under ostensibly Christendom, although there were far more pagans then. You had brothels, you had all kinds of degeneracy that was still going on. And when they reached Carthage, St. Augustine's area, they found that there were so many brothels. So what they did is they closed them all down, and they forced the women to either go into exile or marry a man. The thing with the U.S. is you see how vis-a-vis LGBTQ and all the other stuff that's happening, they're exporting it, and primarily because they're safe. There isn't this other population that can threaten them, and they're able to convert them before they could be a threat.
You mean like the American Empire and its favored groups and
right? So that kind of rise of degeneracy that we're seeing, particularly in the last 10 years, it's normalization, it's infiltration into institutions, and its proliferation globally through the way that America exports it. The reason they accelerate that is so that there isn't like an out group population that could threaten it or challenge it, right? I think they do recognize what phase they're in.
Yeah.
And they don't believe they can change it. So
I think there's smart enough people in, maybe not the halls of power directly, but who probably recognize the rot and who've, taken those Spenglerian lessons to heart. But then again, you never know, right? I mean, maybe I
just think they have a different
people.
take on it.
Yeah,
I just think they might agree with it and say, but so what?
Nothing lasts forever, but who cares? Yeah.
Right. It's like, well, you want it to end now? You know what's worse? This ending.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know what's worse? History coming back. That's what's worse. The machinations of history coming back. Yeah. But yeah, that's, I write about this in my book, right? I mean, aesthetically, you can see this, with neoliberal kitsch. But we've been going on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has been, but I think it's been a productive 3 hours, which means we're at about our limit. So if anyone has any last minute things they'd like to bring up.
Apparently, they took
sarcasm.
out a satellite station recently, the Russians. Did you hear about that?
Oh, really?
Yeah, let me look here. It's right here in Telegram. Apparently they just recently took out a satellite station in where is it? Is it Belgorod? Or somewhere like that. No, not Belgorod. Sorry, they must have deleted. Yeah, but they're talking. I'm browsing Telegram channels. They're talking about T-90s being blown up. Captured Ukrainian soldiers from this offensive. Other than that, I don't know. I haven't been keeping too close to the ground, but apparently there's a lot of drones over Kiev tonight.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah,
there are. There's also been a failed interception. I've seen some of these, and I've seen it even happen to the Russians. The air defense system launches the missile, and the missile does this loop,
Yeah.
and it hits back. Sometimes the launcher itself, sometimes like another building. I don't know. Maybe the Russians are hunting for any more Patriot missile defense systems. I did think before we sign off, I did think it was funny when they said that they shot down all 6 Kinjals, and then they said, well, okay, so maybe one of them hit our Patriot missile system, but we repaired it.
6 million Kinjals. That sounds like quite a bit, if you ask me. But I'm not gonna question the official numbers here. So you can say those kind of things at the end of the show.
Remember the Houthis took out Patriot missile systems like 2 years ago with far less advanced missiles,
or many times the Iron Dome has been penetrated.
Yeah. Like it's again, it's just kind of this almost religious like faith and technology and innovation. It will save us, and but you have far weaker powers with far more crude technology that are able to take them out. Like you really want to believe a supersonic Kinjal can't do it? That's ridiculous. I mean, they arrested 6 people who kind of got an image of the explosion. Like, why arrest them? You knocked all of them out anyways. I mean, you didn't. Why arrest them?
Yeah. So apparently they confirmed that there were Ukrainian paratroopers along the group that went to Belgorod. So they captured a lot of them.
Yeah. So again, everybody will forget this. 2-3 days later, more truth comes out, and guess what? The majority were not Russians. There were Russians who moved to Ukraine and got the support of Ukrainians to join them on this excursion, this safari. It's whatever. I mean, the whole thing was I believe, like we already discussed it, but the short-term reason is probably to take people's attention away from Bakhmut. Because everybody made such a big deal about it, and then you had the flipping of the script. They started to use Prigozhin instead of Surovikin's script. Anyhow, it's stuff we already know.
Well, of course, any other last-minute things you'd like to say? I'm sure Geo has some things that he would like to plug, and of course, we always, I'll just say offhand, I said at the beginning of the show, right out the bat, give this man your money. I don't know what he's going to tell you. Give this man your money, but tell us why specifically we should give you our money.
Well, because I'm reading my book now, and
wonderful.
So I've been quiet on the content. Last week I released my episode of Content Mine with Scott Mannion, and I was with Prude, of course, on his channel. We were talking about the current Meatball Ron situation. But next week in the Digital Archipelago, it will be on my channel, and we're going to review the film Place Beyond the Pines with Ryan Gosling. So it's another He's Literally Me film, and we're going to read an essay on cinema and violence. And so hopefully we won't have we always get to talking about hot political takes, but I think also Fish Tank is ending next week, maybe.
Oh no!
So that'll be. I'll have to talk. I'm gonna write the definitive theory cell article on Fish Tank and its significance. So I thought Letty was going to win, but it's pretty clear that Josie's going to win. And I'm not a huge fan of Josie, but I don't know. It is what it is. It's kind of depressing watching Fish Tank. That now that it's only Letty, Josie, and Airsoft Fatty, but the house is all ruined and destroyed, and it's quieter and it looks trashed, and it's very, I'm curious to see what season 2 is going to look like. I mean, I think they should take even more esoteric Twitter weirdos and put them in the Fish Tank. They should Campbot and Logo will be on Fish Tank. I'll be on Fish Tank. I'll apply. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Campbot and Logo and Fish Tank. What was that? Oh my god!
That's going to be burned in my mind probably for the next week and a half. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I will say,
they'll start throwing piss on each other like they do in
for good or for ill, you always say something that lingers with me for about a week and a half. Which is
I'm gonna tweet that right now. I'm trying to stay away from Twitter. I'm on lock right now just because like to focus on writing, but I always like browse Twitter occasionally still, even though my notifications are off. It's just that I should tweet that like next season of Fish Tank Campot logo. They'll start throwing piss on each other.
That's. I don't think I'd like to see that, but I think that's. I'm not even gonna say that needs to happen, but I'll just say it's.
It'll be Campot logo, Amy Therese. Who else is it faced? Campot logo, Amy Therese. Who'll be another one? You have to like round it out with the leftoid, so it'll be like her Amy Therese, but then the leftist equivalent Amy Therese will be like, who's that like who's that not Red Scare, but who's that like Chapo woman that has
the
like
hell
an
if I know.
OnlyFans?
You would know out of any of us here.
Yeah, she's got like an OnlyFans, and she's like kind of stupid. What's her name?
That doesn't narrow it down.
No, but she like goes on Chapo.
That doesn't narrow it down.
Yeah, I forget her name, but you'll have like some leftist like influencer. You'll have like the Nickelodeon. What's her name? Like the Bernie girl. Like whatever you say.
Oh,
Boomer.
the Hispanic one that was.
Yeah, I think she's got OnlyFans.
I think that just goes without
Amy
saying.
Therese will start like legit like attacking her. That'll be funny.
That sounds like I don't even know what to say. I'll just
We love our girl Amy Therese, folks. We love our girl Amy Therese. She's a good friend of mine. But she'll like if you put her in Fish Tank, if you put her with like a leftist woman, she'll like start attacking. She'll like breathe because the rules of fishing, you can't like physically like go after each other. But like Amy she won't last like a week. I feel she'll go crazy. They'll have to like loot crate Monster energy drinks. No, she doesn't like Monster. Her favorite is a Red Bull. So they'll have to like loot crate Red Bulls to her, and she'll like act up and start attacking the other contestants. Anyways, yeah, I don't know why I keep talking about.
I have no idea where the hell this has gone, but I'm not opposed to it. I'll just put it that way. But any other last minute things that anyone would like to cover?
I don't have anything. I think we covered quite a bit. There's always something somebody forgets. I know.
I think by early next month.
I always forget. Yes, I do. I think we're gonna see something in the next 2 weeks. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. But I'm just seeing that pressure again on them. So.
Well, thank you once again, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of the War Report, and we will see you guys next time. And goodbye.
Goodbye and take care.